Good morning, everybody. It's 9:03 a.m. on Thursday, September 23rd, 2021, and we'll be calling this meeting of the Board of Directors of the Animal Service Center of the Mesilla Valley to order. Would I be able to get a roll call, please?
Certainly. Board Member McMahon is absent. Board Member Enriquez.
Present.
Board Member Flores is absent. Board Member Ellens is absent. Board Member Cantara.
Here.
Board Member Abeta Stuve.
Here.
Board Member Trujillo is absent. Chair Sanchez.
Present. Okay, we have a quorum. Mr. Thacker, are there any changes to the agenda? I see him shaking his head. There are none. So can I get a motion and a second to approve the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second, Gandara.
Moved by Vice Chair Betestuvi, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Gandara. Is there any input? Okay, can I get a roll call on the approval of agenda, please?
Board Member Enriquez.
Yes.
Board Member Gandara.
Yes.
Board Member Abeta Stuve.
Yes.
And Chairman Sanchez.
Yes, we have an approved agenda. All right, moving on, we are on to the minutes. This is the approval of the minutes from the Ascmv board meeting held on August 26, 2021. I will note that there is one minor change to the minutes. There was a reference to, during the ACO report from the city of Las Cruces, they had mentioned Ms. Lucero, but it's actually, we wanted to reflect Lieutenant Watala. So that has been made to the minutes. So can I get a motion and a second to approve the minutes as corrected?
I'll move to approve the minutes as amended.
Second, Gandara.
Thank you. We have a motion by Vice Chair Betestuvi, seconded by Mayor Pro Tem Gandara. Are there any other changes to the minutes? Okay, hearing none, can I get a roll call, please?
Board Member Enriquez.
Yes.
Board Member Gandara.
Yes.
Board Member Abeta Stuve.
Yes.
And Chairman Sanchez.
Yes, the meeting minutes are approved. All right, we're moving on to the reports and presentations section of the agenda. We will start, let's see, who do we want? Mary Lou, will you care to kick us off? So we'll start with the county ACO, followed by the city. Good morning, Ms. Ward.
Good morning. Mary Lou Ward, Doñana County Animal Control Supervisor. And let me pull up our report for August of 2021. Okay, starting into August of 2021, we reported 244 stray animals. Out of those 244 stray animals, 163 of those were picked up. 60 of those were stray cats, and 103 were stray dogs. In addition to that, we had 16 sick or injured animals. 6 of those were cats, and 10 of those were dogs. We also had 8 owner surrender animals. Those were all dogs. This is a chart. I kind of revamped it a little bit so that you could see the numbers a little bit better on a 4-year comparison chart of the stray animal comparison for the years compared. And if you could see, we had 244 compared to 2020, which we had 278. 2019, we had 431. And 2018, we had 315. Those were reported strays. So we had a lot less. Well, last year we still had a lot less going into these years. Now our 4-year return to owner comparison chart as well. I kind of revamped this as well to add the numbers at the bottom. We returned 23 last month in August. Compared to the months before, you could see the comparison there. And then, of course, going into our additional animals that were picked up, we talked about the ones in the red already. We also had 9 welfare holds that were picked up, 0 animal cruelties, 2 of the quarantines, and then I added the rabies submission for bats. We turned in 3 bat rabies submissions, and 2 of those were negative, but 1 did come back positive for rabies. I left this in here for a reference on the explanation of the geodistricts. And then, of course, this is broken down by the geodistricts of the animals that were picked up. District number 1, we had a total of 5. Number 2, 33. Number 3, 27. Number 4, 32. District 5, 33. District 6, 5. And District 7, 28. So you could see where our hotspot areas are in which district. And then I just broke this down. This is a new slide that's been added on our stray cats that were picked up by districts. So you can show this as a comparison for the year to date. And then, of course, I did the same thing for our stray dogs for our year to date by districts. And then the reasons for owner release of ownership. Aggressive was 1, killing livestock 3, vicious and or dangerous 2, and then animals that were sick were 2. And for that, I'll stand for any questions.
Hey, are there any questions for Ms. Ward? Ms. Ward, I just was curious. It seems like the last 2 months, I guess it's in District 2, it seems like there was just a huge jump in the number of cats that were picked up. Is there anything in particular, like a colony or something of that nature, that was identified, or a residence or something of that nature?
Yeah, we've had some people that are trapping out there, so we've had some more people calling for cats in traps. We are trying to discourage people to trap right now, but we're still picking up traps,
Okay,
cats and
think,
traps.
Yeah, and I think if you go to the next slide, that's the one that I think caught my attention in particular.
This one?
Yes, ma'am. So it's just like, we had a couple of months that were high, and then it kind of dropped off, and then July and August, District 2 seemed like it was that kind of area of across the county that was the hotspot for cats.
Correct,
Okay.
yes.
So they're just trapping and then making the calls?
They're trapping. We've had some areas where we've had a lot of people that are complaining. They've had issues. They didn't want the cats for various reasons. So we've asked for them not to trap for various reasons. But, when there is problems in that area, we can't totally deny not to pick anything up.
Okay. Thank you, Ms. Ward. Appreciate it.
Any other questions?
I think that's it. Good morning, Commissioner Ellens. Let the record show, Commissioner Ellens joined us at 9:10 a.m. If there are no other questions, do you have any questions for Ms. Ward? Or? Okay, very good.
Okay,
Thank you.
thank you.
And we'll move on to the city ACO.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the board. My name is Gino Jimenez. I'm the Animal Control Supervisor for the City of Las Cruces. I'm going to present to you our numbers for August 2021. Excuse me. For the month of August, we responded to 508 calls for strays. Of those, 243 were GOA, meaning that the officer did not have contact with that animal. Excuse me. Of those, we were able to apprehend 265. 288 were impounded at the Animal Service Center, 112 were dogs, and 116 were cats. We were successful in field RTOing 37 dogs, and we attempted to field RTO 20. So that gave us a total of 57 identifiable animals. Here is our 3-year stray call comparison. As you can see by our numbers, we're still averaging the same, more or less. It's keeping within our trend. Here is our 3-year field RTO comparison. Looking at last month, July, we were up pretty high at 53, but then we dipped down to our average of 37. So here are some reasons for citizens owner releasing their animals. 5 for aggression, 2 actually killed the owner's other dog. 2 dogs for illness, owners could not afford the vet bills. 2 from one owner who was homeless and he didn't have anywhere or any means to care for those animals any longer. 3 dogs owners were unable to care for. 1 cat that had become aggressive with the owner. And 1 dog, the owner was having some mental health issues and chose to redeem that dog. Owner released that dog. So here are our reasons for the officers being unable to field RTO animals. 16 for no contact by phone or at the residence. 1 with the microchip was not registered. And 3, the microchip information was not current. And with that, I will stand for any questions.
Okay, are there any questions for Officer Jimenez? All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Gino.
You're welcome.
Welcome back, too.
Thank you.
All right, we're on to shelter statistics and activities and the Executive Director report by Mr. Thacker. Good morning, sir.
Good morning. How are you, board? You look
Wonderful.
beautiful today, as always. My name is Clint Thacker, Executive Director at the Animal Service Center in Mesilla Valley, here to present to you the August numbers for the Ascmv. The current population is 534 as of yesterday. You see that is up from 2020, but significantly down from 2019. We included 2019 in this report, as you'll see going through, because 2020 was such an odd year for the Ascmv as far as impounds and pretty much all numbers. So our intake in 2021 for dogs, 381, 2021 for cats, 310, and then other was 7. You see that really large number from 2019 of 1,060 animals that came into the Ascmv. 2020 was half of that at 571, and then 2021 we're up from that 571 to 698. So we're still, we're slowly doing that climbing, etching into the higher numbers. These are transfers or rescues, say, that came through, a total of 187. Action Program for Animals is always a local rescue that does a lot for us, specifically for the sick kittens or cats, newborns, and we appreciate all that they do. Some others there, Halo Animal Rescue is a partner we use in Colorado, and appreciate them with us. Humane Society of Utah was the recipient of Flight Animals from Dog is My Co-Pilot, and New Hope Rescue as well. Halo is located in Arizona, and New Hope Rescue is located in Colorado. As a total, though, 135 dogs, 51 cats, and 1 other. So our returns, we had 3 behavior problem, 2 landlord doesn't allow, cannot afford basic care is 1, and lifestyle change is 1. So a total of 7. Bernice was able to get the dates, like of how long the animal had the animal to when it surrendered, and we're looking at it, it was on average between 8 and 11 days was all these animals were owned. So it was a pretty quick turnaround. We encourage, and we actually give paperwork that says the power of 3 days, 3 months, or 3 days, 3 weeks, and 3 months. We encourage people to have them, and the reasons why each one of those landmarks.
Mr. Chairman,
Commissioner Owens.
Clint, when we receive an animal from the owner, do we ever get the medical records for the animal? So that we can transport them when we send them out for adoption?
Well, these animals were our animals to begin with, so we have the medical record, especially from just those 3 days or 11 days. But if an animal comes in and they have the information from it, then yes, we do take that medical information. If they don't have any medical information, which is often the case, we start the animal over on vaccines for that.
Okay. Because I got an animal from a breeder that was trying to find someone, and I was able to get permission to access the animal's medical records from the previous vet.
Okay. So the outcomes, and I want to have you focus specifically on the percentage, because that's what's going to be telling the story. Because like, if you remember 2019, you see the adoptions there were 258, and that's a really big number. But remember the intake we had in 2019 was over 1,000 animals. And in 2021, you look at it's only 140 adoptions, but remember we only had 500, I think it was 590 something animals come in, so just half. But with just half the animals, we're only 4% below the adoption numbers there for percentage-wise. So the percentage is the important one to keep an eye out for that one. Reclaim for 2021 with 11% or 11.5% with 80, 26.8% for rescued animals. That's actually the highest in the 3 years that are there in the graph, so we're grateful for that. Community cats was at 10.3. Euthanasia did go higher to 33%. That's 230 animals. So a live release rate of 67.8%. Here's the euthanasia reasons. So the number one, again, reason is behavior feral. We're expecting that to drop now that we have a TNR program in the city. It's still, though, going to be up there because our capability or capacity is not matching what the demand is. We were basing our numbers off of 2019 and 2020 to absorb the amount of feral animals coming in, and that number, it looks like, is going to be tripled. I mean, it's just amazing the number of cats that are coming in. So our total number of visitors, 656 in August. That's quite a ways down from July of the 1,179, but we still are up there with 656. We had 196 appointments made. 88% of those were kept, and 60%, or 118, resulted in finalized adoptions at the Ascmv. Website views for 40,283. And again, if you're watching, that's not original hits, that's spots on or hits on each page. So if you view an animal, that's one page, and if you go back to the original, that's another hit, and then you view another animal, that's another hit. So just keep that in mind. That's not original views. But still, 40,283 is pretty darn good. Facebook views is our third highest with 2,954. And these are our adorable pets of the week, Corn, and I was told that's pronounced Jacques, so J-A-Q. But these animals are available for adoption there at the Ascmv. All right, any questions?
All right, thank you, Mr. Thacker. Are there any questions for Clint? Madam Vice Chair?
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Clint. Going back to slide 5, I know that there was a couple returns for landlord issues, and I know on your paperwork you have some information asking about if you own a home or a rental, and so I just wanted to see, obviously there's going to be issues from time to time, but if there was anything that was noted with these two cases.
For the, I'm sorry, was it the landlord?
The landlord issues.
All right, I don't know anything specific noted, but I can tell you our process for adoptions, we do not require paperwork. We took all of that out, and we're going on what the individual says. I think at some point you have to trust people, and also on the other side of that is that they will take ownership of the animal and get the animal to where they could take it if not. So that's the conversation we have with them. It's up to the individual to know what their limitations are. But I can find out on those two and see if there was anything specific about it and get that back to you.
Okay, thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Are there any other questions from Mr. Thacker? Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, Clint, I know we received a letter with a petition, I guess, from folks from the community related to adoption. I know you tried to stress the percentages, right? And I think some of the commentary was, we think we need to open up the center and so that folks can freely view the animals and such. Can you address that, or is there a place or a time later in the agenda that is going to be expressed?
No, I'd love to address it now.
Okay.
That's fine.
Thank you.
So the letter was sent to the board and also other city and county officials. While it was well-meaning, it was a little bit misleading, especially on the numbers when you're comparing. Again, like we said before, over 1,000 impounds, of course, you're going to have more adoptions. So that's why it's important to look at the percentages of that. Regarding the policy we have for appointment-based adoptions, if we just go off purely we're still in a pandemic, we're here in masks, we're sitting 5 feet apart, we have a more dangerous variant out there than what originally started, and I need to keep my staff safe. And if that is limiting those individuals, if you look at, I looked at 2019 staff number, or not staff numbers, but visitors to the center, it was over 2,200 people coming into the center. And I do not want to expose my staff to that number of individuals. Not only is it for keeping them safe, it's also, most of my staff has significant others and also young children, and some live with their parents, to expose them. Not only that, if an employee, as we learned back in November of 2020, if an employee has COVID, it spreads like wildfire. And we had that. It was so bad that we had to close the center down. That significantly impacted our capacity of care. Euthanasias will go through the roof if that happens again. So that is the driving force right now. I urge the board to continue to do to support the appointment-based adoptions, at least until the pandemic is over. Let's get on safe ground, and that would also give us more time to evaluate and see where we are. Because it's so new, we don't know if we are saving considerable amount of money, because we don't have people walking through and passing on the sicknesses to the animals side by side and so on. So we're looking at numbers that way. You know, are we spending less on a specific type of medicine that helps treat kennel cough? You know, so we're just looking at those things to see if it actually is advantageous. But bottom line, I want to keep my staff safe, not only because I care for them, but I also care for the animals.
Thank you, Clint. I really appreciate you addressing that. I felt like let's hit it head on, and I feel very strongly about the center continuing with the appointments. I think it's imperative for the safety and well-being not only of your staff, but the animals as well. Clint, so the question, you commented about the 2,200 folks in 2019 that came in. Now, can you address from that 2,200 how many actually adopted animals from those 2,200? I remember vaguely in the 6 years that I can't quote statistics per se, but I vaguely remember that you're always going to have people who come in with family and sort of use that as an outing, and some may not be serious to adopt animals. And so please tell me, do you have that number of the 2,200 that has actually adopted animals from the center?
So the answer to that is no,
Okay.
I don't. And the number might be skewed a little bit because, as you said, the family would come. Mom, while dad's working, mom might bring the kids in, and that would be 4 people. You know, and so it would be greatly skewed if we looked at even the percentage of the people coming into one adoption versus now we only allow 2 people per appointment. But I can tell you that it was not a high percentage of the people coming in and animals leaving. I remember seeing that and saying, holy cow, we have 2,200 people coming in. And I think you even addressed that. If I remember once when I first came on, we were signing people in, and we still do that. But we wanted to know if they're interested in volunteering and if they're interested in more info. And we're still capturing that info. But as far as if they adopt it or not, it would be hard to tell. It would be hard to get that information, but I know it wasn't a significant number.
Thank you, Clint. I appreciate you addressing that. And then slide 10 and 11, do you mind going?
No.
Yeah, the webpage views. So I cruise through your website often, and I select an animal, but it always it always takes me back to the beginning, right? So I don't know how advantageous that is, because I'm like, now I have to go from the beginning all the way to wherever, the next animal is, if you will. So I'm thinking, I think these are great numbers. I think people are definitely interested to see what's available and whatnot. But is there a way that you can capture? Like, I saw that you were interested, in this animal, and is there anything that we can do to answer, the questions to really capitalize on the views here? I'm not sure if there's an app, if Facebook allows, or if you can capture that in some form or fashion.
Thank you. It's a great question, and I'm going to echo your frustrations on when you go back a page, it totally restarts.
Yeah.
That's the way it's actually not a website thing. It's a Shelter Love thing, our shelter software, because they have a code that you put in. And so when you go back a page, the code refreshes and reloads. So it is frustrating. I know that we've told Shelter Love that we need it to, or just refresh for that filter selection that an individual had. They put it on their to-do list, and their to-do list is very long from, from the ASCMV. Sure. So in regards to your other questions.
It's not that frustrating to me, really, but,
I do
like,
get that
what
a lot,
animals
though.
that kind of look the same after a while, and so it's hard to keep track, but anyhow.
So regarding your other questions, I just lost it. What was your other question?
Capitalizing on the...
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
All right. So there's several ways that an individual can get a hold of us. If they can contact us, they call us and say, I'm interested in this ID number. They can also send us a message on Facebook, say, I'm interested in this animal and this ID number. They can even email us as well. That's on there that they can send it. And the email goes to the entire ASCMV, not just to one person. So we have individuals that respond to those emails. Another thing you can do is start an application for adoption through the website. And that, I believe, if I remember correctly, there's a button on each animal there that says Start Adoption Process. And what that does is that sends a notification to Shelter Love. And when somebody, like our adoption specialists or front office, they log in, there's a big red number that shows how many there are waiting for, quote unquote, approval. So they'll be contacted by the front staff for that. So there's multiple ways to show interest in an animal. The best way, though, is to call us, so then we can tell you if there's anything on that animal, if it might not be available, like it might be going on transport, or it might be under medical treatment, things like that. So the best is to call us.
Thank you, Clint, for that. I appreciate it, and it's always important to review that for folks that are listening in and for the folks that are here today. Last is, so do you have to fill out the application in its entirety to get a email or whatever contact that the staff is using to contact folks?
That's a great question. I'm not sure on that. I can get back to you.
Okay, all right. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Good morning, Councilor Flores. Just want to let the record reflect that Councilor Flores joined us at 9:25 a.m. Good morning. All right. Are there any other questions for Mr. Thacker? Okay. Clint, I think we're good.
Thank you.
Okay, we're on to committee reports, starting with Finance. Mr. Enriquez.
Good morning, Chair. Thank you. The Finance Committee did not meet last week as we did not have board members present. So Mr. Saffield is here to give the finance report, and my understanding, no issues. And he'll go through it now. Thank you.
Good morning, Mr. Chair, members of the board. My name is Josh Saffel, and on behalf of the Finance Department of the City of Las Cruces, I'd like to present the unaudited financial report for the period ended August 31st, 2021. So to start with, we'll look at the statement of net position. In the general fund, there was cash of $1,389,122, receivables of $319,000. So we had total assets of $1,708,122. Of that, liabilities we had $68,269, revenue collected in advance of $179,869, which left in the general fund a fund balance, an unassigned fund balance of $1,459,984. In the capital projects fund, we had cash of $29,798 and a restricted fund balance of $29,798. In the capital assets fund, we had our total capital assets less the accumulated depreciation amount totaling $181,759 and an equal amount in the unassigned fund balance. Looking at our change in net position for all funds, for the general fund, we had total revenues of this period of $996,931 and total expenditures of $352,271. So for the period, we had a positive net change to fund balance of $644,660. As we can see, there was no activity in the capital projects fund, nor any activity in the capital assets fund. Looking at our budget to actual, for total revenues, the $996,000 was 26.2% of budget, and our total expenditures of $352,000 were 9.3% of budget. This being the second month of the period, we had a budget parameter of 16.7%. So we were well above that with revenue and slightly under that with total expenditures. Looking at our revenues and expenditures, of course, this will look familiar from last year as well. We see that we started off with a very large gap between the revenue and the expense, and that was due, of course, to the contributions from the city and the county. And of course, now we see the drop-off where we have the revenue is now only slightly above expenditures, but that's still good. Showing that we are bringing in more money than we are expending at this point. Finally, looking at percentage of total expenditures, again, our total expenditures at this point are $352,271. Of that, 69% was made up of personnel expenses, 15% was made up of services, 9% for insurance, 5% for supplies, and 1% for other, and 1% for repairs and maintenance. That will conclude my presentation, and I stand for any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Saffold. Are there any questions on the finance report? Councilor Flores?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Josh, Mr. Saffold. So insofar as the general fund is concerned, is a general fund a fund from which other funds can have funds transferred? The funds are the funds are the funds, but say, for example, one fund is falling short. Is it possible to transfer from the general fund to that particular fund?
Yes, I believe that would be possible, but of course it would require action from the board.
Correct, correct. And I had another question, and personnel. So 69% of the budget goes to personnel, and is that allocated personnel, or is that allocated funds, or do we actually have those employees personnel now?
The 69% that was represented there was of the actual expenditures, so I'd say the 69% represents the actual employees that are there.
And is there, in fact, an allocation anywhere for more employees?
I believe so, but the department might know more.
Clint Thacker, Executive Director, Animal Service Center, Mesilla Valley. Madam Flores, or Chair Flores, so yes, we have money for additional employees to come in. So the money that was spent there that shows was the actual amount spent in last month, period. It does not reflect that is the 69% is not the total percentage of our budget for employees. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, well, Josh answered it. And
Okay.
the question you're supposed to answer is there any money, or I would like you to answer. I'm directing you to answer this question. My question is, are there any positions that are unfilled?
Yes,
And-
there are.
Okay, and where would those funds come from? And that's why I was asking about the general fund money.
Yeah, so it would come from the same fund that the current ones are being paid out of, in my personnel budget.
Okay, so it's not our job at all to be telling you to, when to hire, how to hire, but it is our job to make sure that the center is staffed so that it operates at an optimal level. And do you have anything to say about that, Clint?
Yes, I can briefly. We have lower levels of staffing right now. We kept it low in 2020 and also coming into 2021 because we were unsure of what COVID was going to bring. We had lower number of animals, so the capacity of care there was good or satisfactory. However, now more animals coming in and we're scrambling to hire individuals, but as you'll see in the presentation later, it's difficult right now to hire individuals at the low amount we're paying, and we're going to get that later in the presentation. But yes, we are working on. I believe we have 7 slated to be coming in different departments in the next coming weeks.
Okay, and so in your presentation that is coming up within a few minutes, will you be covering those issues and proposing solutions to that shortage?
Yes, ma'am.
And do you have to go hat in hand to who? To the board, to the city manager, to the county manager? Where do those funds come from?
We'll be able to absorb that with the plan that we have in place.
Oh, in terms of?
In terms of our budget.
In terms of budget and?
In terms of salary, so I don't want to get into too much detail right now, but the salary increase, we plan on raising the wage, our minimum wage that we're paying individuals right now, and that will bring in more people for the job. Right now, I'm only hiring at $11.03 is what staff is starting at.
Holy moly.
Yeah, again, we're going to talk about it. So the higher wage that I am able to hire at and also absorb into my personnel budget without asking for more funds from the city or the county.
Is that $11 an hour for full-time, part-time? Full-time?
And part-time.
And part-time, so irrespective of full-time, part-time, it's $11 an hour. And any benefits? I mean, is there anything that an employee gets besides tired?
Besides tired, is that what you said? Yeah. So yes, a full-time employee is eligible for benefits through the city of Las Cruces.
So it's a full-time. So how many full-time employees do you have and how many part-time employees do you have?
I'd have to get that number for you to be exact.
Okay. It'd be good to know, Clint, just because I know that we as a board really care about the animals, and you, and of course the staff, and we want it to run efficiently. And do you have a high turnover?
Yes.
Yeah.
Our average is about 2 years.
Holy moly. Okay, thank you very much, Clint, Mr. Thacker, and thank you, Mr. Chair Sanchez.
Thank you, Councilor. Are there any other questions for Mr. Saffel? All righty. Thank you.
Okay, we're on to the executive committee, which we held with myself, Mr. Thacker, and Vice Chair Batistuvi, and they're really I don't have a lot from the meeting. I think that's reflective in that even in our agenda, we don't have any items for approval. We did discuss what was going to be the work session, which is now in this agenda, the future plans of the Ascmv. And then we also discussed the future participation for the Coalition for Pets and People. So, but from a high level, I think that was everything pretty close to what we discussed, and there wasn't a whole lot there. But I don't know if there's any questions, any other input that I missed. Thanks, Clint. I just want to make sure from what I had on my notes and recalled. Okay, very good. All right, we're moving on to the Facilities Committee. Mayor Pro Tem Gandara, did you have any updates?
We did have a meeting. We did have a meeting? Yeah, we did have a meeting, I thought. Looking for my notes. Honestly, I am a little disorganized, so Clint, help me. We always talk about, what I remember is the issue with correcting that area, the ponding area. And we were moving through, and now we have to put a stop to it because the ideas that we've had, and Clint, with the city and others, is not going to work. It's not large enough. And so they were working on, meaning the city, coming back to the drawing board and trying to figure out a different design for the ponding area. And if you remember, that ponding area is causing us grief, and we need to correct it. And so, Clint, I know it's been almost a month since we've met. Is there an update for that?
Yes, there is. So the city, thankfully, the city is doing a very good job of keeping us in the foremost of having it done. We've had 2 engineers, different firms come, and I believe they're getting a quote for that project. What it was is we had, the issue is we have a ponding area, a retention pond inside our fenced area. It's way too close to the Ascmv. It gathers mosquitoes and also the water doesn't drain. It just sits and it has to evaporate. It doesn't drain out. So we were going to move it, but then we found out we couldn't build one large enough to accept that you have to build one to replace what it was originally designed for, not what it currently holds. So they said that retention pond is actually supposed to be a lot deeper, but through the years, the silt and everything that's gone in has accumulated and not made it as deep. So with the 5-foot buffer of our property that you have to have, we can't make one big enough. So engineering is coming out, and they have to engineer a properly engineered retention pond for that. But like I said, 2 have already come out, so they're still working on it.
Thank you. I found my notes. Yay,
Yay.
I'm not that disorganized after all. We spoke of also, you were moving Kennels, right, that week. And how did that go, Clint?
It's been a challenge, but if you remember, for the new construction, we lost the lot area, impound lot behind our main gate. That is all now turned over to construction. So we turned all of our impound area back to the east side of the shelter, what's called our Kennels. So our building maintenance individual, Paul Reeves, has done an excellent job in getting everything moved over. We are now impounding out of that area, and it's just a matter of getting, I think this might be better over here. And this is just kind of the small wrinkles ironed out. So we're in that process now.
Cool, thank you. And then we talked about vacancies, where we were at with hiring. At the point you were hiring animal caregivers because you had a couple of vacancies. Animal care specialist is on the horizon and needing to write a job description. Am I correct in that?
So the animal care specialist description's been written. It's been in the hands of HR for some time now. To be able, they have to go through a consultant and get the salary range and everything done for that. So we're just waiting on that to be completed.
So when you say for some time, what are you speaking? What's the timeline?
We'll have to look up to be exact, but I know it's been months.
Mr. Enriquez, could you please check on that and get back to us? Okay, perfect, thank you. Also, you were looking at a vet tech and surgical tech, I guess. There's a vacancy, and I have here, no. They're starting on September 12th.
A surgical tech, yes. And he has actually, because delays with the city, he has not started yet, but he will be shortly.
Another area, Mr. Enriquez, if you would please check with HR, and I'll be meeting with IFO, Mr. Peely, this afternoon for my regular individual meetings that I have with him, and I'll talk to him about some of the delays and try to get that moving. I think that's it. And then we always talk about the new facility and where we're at.
Yeah, the new facility is looking great. Like I said, they took over a lot area. Foundations are in, and they're doing the rough in for the electrical and the plumbing underground. So we're ecstatic for that. One thing I do want to add is we had a clogging drain issue in one of our kennels, a specific kennel, not a large run, but a specific kennel. And when Roto-Rooter came out to unclog it, they found that it goes right straight down into dirt. So the P-trap that's in there was broken. So yesterday, or 2 days ago, they had to cut it out, the cement area, and then dig down, replace the P-trap, and then fill it all back up. So that was completed, that work was done. We're also now on a maintenance schedule with, not Roto-Rooter, I think it's Maddox Plumbing. Bernice, is that right? Maddox Plumbing for preventive care? Okay. I'm sorry. So Maddox Plumbing for preventive care, and they come out and they do the main lines on a preventive maintenance schedule instead of when there is a problem. And that's working out fairly well.
Yeah, I appreciate the update, Clint.
Yep.
That's all, Mr. Chair. We try to be thorough.
That's pretty good.
And maybe, Clint, I'm not sure if you want to change the date, maybe more towards the middle of the month, and maybe we can, do that so, because at the beginning of the month, you're updating me, but there's always changes when we get to this point, so.
Things move pretty quick at the
They do.
Ascmv, so I serve at your pleasure, so whatever you'd like to meet, I'd be more than happy to.
Well, maybe Commissioner Ellens and I can talk about what may be the appropriate day for him, and we will try to rearrange a time to meet so that we're getting up-to-date information.
Okay, great.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gondara. Okay, so we're on to the exciting discussion items for Mr. Thacker. You're back up again. Gotta wear those comfortable shoes today, Clint.
Yes.
All right, we're on discussion item 5A, which is discuss the future plans of the ASCMV. Take it away.
Thank you very much. Clint Thacker, Executive Director of the Animal Service Center, Mesilla Valley. I'm very excited to present this presentation to you. This is a long time in coming. I hope to have it in a little less of such a formal setting to get a lot more discussion. However, I know time is not tight today, but we want to have a good discussion in a reasonable amount of time. So earlier, probably about 2 months ago, 2 separate individuals came to me and asked me, and they're on the board, if you had a magic wand and waved it, what's going to happen? What would you do? So I had several meetings with our managers who are with me today, and to answer any questions that come specific. And the following plan is what we came up with from that session. So this is a big picture. This is something that we want to present to you. And in order to get through it all, I want to go through, but if you have topics, conversation, discuss on one thing, we can sure hit it. So a quick over.
Real
Yes.
quick, so I just want to clarify, so do we want to go ahead and to try to move in an expeditious manner, maybe take notes, ask questions at the end, so that way you can get through the presentation?
Yes.
Okay, so if there's no objections from the board, we'll just take down notes and then we'll ask him at the end of the presentation.
And my slides are not numbered, I apologize, but it's, you can tell me what one to go to. So in an overview, we want to talk about staffing levels, and not just in total, but I really do want to get specific on the departments. We want to talk about a new department we want to create at the Animal Service Center. We're going to address the JPA, animal control, some critical needs that are needed sooner rather than later in a specific area. And then we're going to have a review, so you have that fresh of everything that we've talked about. Most of all, the most important at the Ascmv is our people. Without our friends and work family, there is no way we'd be able to get anything done. I appreciate every single one of those people. Without them, I would not be able to, I would not have a job, and the people of Doña Ana County would not be able to be served. So the staffing levels. I'm not going to go into a lot of detail right now on this. There's other slides. But we're looking at, for the front office, is 5 full-time and 3 part-time. And I'm talking about new staff. This is not, we want to hire these. This is, we need funding for brand new staff. These are all for specific reasons. It's not for we would like to have them. It'd be nice. The front office, for instance, needs an office lead, and also new individuals for the new center that's coming up. And then 3 additional part-time, because we want to go out and get to the off-sites more. Right now, it's only 1. We want to get out on the weekends, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, when individuals are busy. In the kennel, we're looking at 8 full-time and 4 part-time. These are additional animal caregivers. That's what ACG is, animal caregiver. These are individuals that care for the animals. They are going to be out at the new center for that. Is where we would like to place those. And then with the new building comes a new building maintenance individual that will be working. Believe it or not, there's actually quite a bit of work for a building maintenance person on a brand new building, with warranties and et cetera that need to be followed and done. Adoption rescue coordinator, and also 5 enrichment and behavior specialists. So a full-time lead for that crew, and then 4 part-time others, and these individuals would be in charge of basic enrichment for the animals, as well as some training, basic training going on. So a total 8 full-time, 4 part-time. Our medical department, we're looking at 4 full-time. Most importantly there, the addition of the Spay Neuter coordinator with TNR happening, and a Spay and Neuter coordination needs to be complete. It is outrageous right now, what we're dealing with, so that is needed. The administration, the HR specialist is something that's exciting, and it was a great idea that was brought to us by Bernice, and we'll go over that more. And then our new department we want to focus on is community outreach. I have a community outreach coordinator. They're going to be over education specialist, social media, trap, neuter, return program manager, and then manage intake. And we're going to go over each one of those and what their roles are going to be. So a total of 6 new staff for the administration side. All right, Commissioner or Councilor Flores, this slide is for you. Our staff wages. Currently, right now, we start at $11.03. That is not what I like to refer to as a living wage. There's no way you can live off of that low of pay. To help that, in the past, we've instituted like merit increases, but at 3%, it just takes so long. And that's if a 3% raise is capable that year. The center has had no COLA or cost of living increases either in the time. So what we want to do is increase the minimum pay at the Animal Service Center, so everybody would be making at least $14 an hour. When talking with our budget analysis, talking with others throughout in the area, $14 an hour is a competitive pay. If you look at going to fast food, they're around $13.80 to a little over $13 an hour. And the reason why we want to do the 14 is we would hire people at the $13 an hour with an incentive that if you're there long enough to be off probation, which is 1 year, then you get another $1 increase after that. With only the average of around 2 years of retention, we're hoping that that will pick up quite a bit because a lot of work goes into training these individuals just to have them leave after even a year or even months later. As I stated before, in a hiring pool that we did for the front office, there was 10 applicants, but when we put them through the tour of the center, only 3 people showed up for the tour. And having months and months, it literally takes 5 to 6 months to have a hiring pool go through the process and for them to be contacted. And so to only go through 3, which probably 1 or 2 of those will be dropped out for interviews. So having a higher pay with that incentive will create more of a hiring pool as well. I have a lot of my staff, my coworkers are working 2 jobs. I've had to do that in my career. That is extremely stressful, especially if you have family that counts on you to be home and nobody else there to make dinners and help with homework, et cetera. So our desire is that we pay this higher wage so people can, 1, be home with families, live off of it, and also spend or more focused time on the Ascmv so we can have a benefit there. To go back really quick to the minimum pay increase, it wouldn't be just for those that have the $14 an hour increase, it would also be for other staff, and we're currently working on that. We want it to be as equitable as possible. We've had several different types of plans come through the managers, but we're working on how to be the most equitable for that increase. The great thing is working with our budget analysis, he's done a great job, and we see that we can roll this out in 2 years, and it's all absorbed by the Ascmv. So we're looking at, it's a 27% increase from $11.03 to $14. So if we do half of that 27% this year, and then a half in the next fiscal year, both of those would be able to be absorbed. Another limitation we currently have is, I believe it was 2 years ago, the federal government changed what an exempt employee can make. But they didn't specify, or they didn't state how much they currently make. It was the minimum that their job makes. Perfect example of this is our assistant kennel supervisor. He's been there a long time. He makes more than the $35,000, but his job starts, or $35,000 is the limit for the exempt employee. But his job starts him, the pay starts at $32,000. So because his job, the salary range, the minimum is below that 35, he no longer qualifies as exempt employee, even though he makes more in his current job. And I see a lot of wrinkled brows, and I promise. I called HR about this several times because we lost our assistant kennel supervisor and also our front office supervisor because of this. When I say lost, that means that they went to non-exempt instead of exempt, which means I have to pay overtime, which means they can't be included in some of the things that we do, or else their schedule will have to be adjusted later on. It just adds, it's not cohesive to a team unit. So we want to look at those and see if we can get all of those, see if we can get some job minimum pays changed for that. This is our new department we want to focus on. This is exciting, the community outreach program. This is a total change to our mission. Our mission has really nothing to do with education or social media. It has to do with caring for animals in a way that meets the laws. So we'd be changing our mission with this one. So first we have a supervisor that would be over all of our community outreach, and then an education specialist. This is near and dear to my heart. I love working with kids. I love being in schools. As an animal control officer, I started and ran my very own award-winning, I might add, education program. I'd go into schools and just talk about responsible pet ownership, what to do, or also safety around stray animals, and it was fun. I loved doing it, and we have nothing like that, nothing. And our children need to have that education because they're going to grow up to be animal owners as well. Not only would they be in schools, the education specialists, but they'd also be at job fairs, education, anywhere possible that they can have an audience. I don't know about you, but social media just confuses me a lot. Somebody sent me one of those QR codes, and I'm like, what do I do with this now? This is not new up-and-coming stuff. This is basic things that the public out there, the up-and-coming generation, knows profusely, and they depend on it. The problem is somebody says, just upload it to TikTok or do a TikTok or put it on Instagram. It is not as easy as just taking a picture and uploading it. If we had somebody, we have several failed starts, I should say. We have an Instagram page, not a lot goes on. We have a Snapchat, it's basically for ads. We have a TikTok that only has like 2 things on it. So a lot of good intentions, but not a lot of follow through. So a social media specialist would solely, this would be their job, to answer, to look at. I think this is a great job for somebody just walking into the marketing department, somebody young who knows how to do these things. So that future there. Trap Neuter Return Program Manager, we can talk more about this after this presentation is one about our TNR program and how we're absorbing it, but this would be our Trap Neuter Return Program Manager. So it might be a little bit different than the actual what we're asking for the TNR, but they would basically run the Trap Neuter Return program. They have to work very closely with animal control officers. They can work on handling deterrence. They can work on talking with individuals, trap rental, all these things that are coming up. We can have somebody to run it. And then our intake manager. Originally, we were going to have our adoption specialists and rescue coordinators handle this, but it was just way too much work, or just the rescue side was way too much work. An intake manager is an individual that meets with people if they want to surrender their dog. Like in Gino and Mary Lou's presentation where they said they couldn't afford it, financial issues, they would meet with them and say, what can we do to help you? Do you want to own your dog? And they'd say, yes, okay, what can we do? And they would gather those resources and help them out. People who don't have a place to live, where's some apartments that allow specific breeds that may be an issue? So it's a resource center, an individual to talk to get that through. It's called intake diversion. It's very common in the industry and a program that we'd like to start. All right, this is, again, Bernice's brainchild, and probably a little bit selfish on her part, which I love, because she is so overwhelmed with just alone the ordering and just keeping us going. The last thing that she likes to deal with is having to deal and work on hiring individuals. So this HR specialist, I want to say, is a direct liaison with HR. And what I mean by that is they have the same rights in the hiring program called Munis and also NeoGov, as does HR. So they would be able to walk our staff, since we have a lot of turnover and we have a lot of need, they'd be able to walk these new hires through the process. At times, we end up waiting weeks just for an email to get sent to our individuals who are waiting. This HR specialist would be able to do it. They'd be able to schedule drug testing. They'd be able to onboard individuals. They would be able to let us know. Sometimes we have staff, new hires show up. We had no idea we're coming. And as a new employee, if I showed up and they didn't know, that would be horrible, just horrible. And so like with our new hire, our grant specialist, I emailed her before she came. And I said, I'm so excited to have you on. We got great plans. I mean, just imagine if your supervisor did that and contacted you saying, this is what to expect the first day. And with an HR specialist that gave you the heads up, they're starting and had a for sure date, we could start doing that and have a lot more quality onboarding program. The other big thing they'll be doing is our payroll. So it was Bernice that was doing it before, and her workload was so much that she could not, so I took it away from her. I was going to do it, and I was told by the city that I am definitely 100% not allowed to do payroll. If I do disciplinary action on somebody and then mess up on payroll, it might look construed as penalizing them. So then we had to give it to our front office specialist, who does our front office manager. She does a fantastic job. However, she too is a manager. So we have that same issue. So this HR specialist would be able to do payroll in a proper manner. All right, more of the nitty-gritty. In medical, kudos to Dr. Haddon and having the foresight and the vision that she has on expanding and also taking on these extra things, extra animals, extra surgeries for the Ascmv. She wants to increase the surgery schedule to be 5 days per week plus, so maybe even more. This is going to take quite a bit of planning and also resources on our part. We want to renovate the adoptable cat room. Once the new center is built, we're going to renovate that area. It's centrally located in the center between all the kennels and the front lobby. So we're able to, it's a perfect place to do surgery. It's bright and large enough to get several surgical tables and things in there for a lot of staff to be moving around. I don't know if you know this or not, but surgery, prepping and the actual surgery is not a standstill process. I go back there and I visit and talk with them. I am always in the way. So they need room, and that's the best place to do it. So that renovation's coming up. Surgical kennel assistants is also a new position. This is individuals that their main priority may be to clean the kennels of the surgery animals, but they can also help with any like technical scrubbing of instruments, things like that. We are requesting an additional spay-neuter coordinator. I've already gone over the increase of trap-neuter return, but more importantly, we want to start qualifying our low-income clients with those qualifiers. We're currently working with SNAP to do it. They do a great job, but if we can eliminate the middle person and go directly with us, the communication is a lot easier. We would still do SNAP surgeries. There's nothing wrong with SNAP. We just want to take care of that process ourselves. So that would take 2 spay-neuter coordinators to do that. And again, as mentioned, to optimize the TNR efforts would be important as well. All right, here's the next one, the mobile spay and neuter van. I can't tell you the number of emails I get, even from people outside of New Mexico, that want this to happen. And we look forward to that. We can. With this big vision that we have, we would be asking for the additional staff that could make that happen. However, you don't just pull up into an outlying area and put a sign up that says spay and neuter. There has to be coordination. How you're going to advertise it, how you're going to be scheduling it, contacting them, telling them what records to bring, not to feed your animals the night before, when to pick up, where to park, where to even have the event. I mean, it is so much work. So we are requesting that the mobile clinic coordinator also be part of that as well. All right, to switch gears a little bit, the Joint Powers Agreement. I'm not sure of the last update to the Joint Powers Agreement was, but as all board members have stated to me that there are some things that need to change, and I echo that. If somebody was to come up to me and say, I have 3 seconds, you tell me what would you change in the JPA, these would be it. For one, I don't think we need to meet monthly. I think a quarterly board meeting is sufficient. If something needs to happen before that, always have the work sessions, or even a meeting that needs to be called is great. We were doing drug testing with the city of Las Cruces. However, that was stopped because it was not part of the JPA. We also wanted to do a little bit more education mandating with the ACOs. The center is currently doing what's called a fear-free shelter program, and our staff is going through that. It basically is, let's make the center less, or take the center out as a reason for stress for these animals. So we want to be able to say, ACOs, you need to have this, ACOs, you need to have that. The next one is a big one as well, the ability to manage intakes. We need to say that once we get to a specific number that our staff can handle, is that it's emergencies only. We're full, let's only take the ones that really have to come. And then, as many of you know, as probably all of you know, I have been beating the drum of let's become part of the city, let's become part of the city. Well, and I'm grateful that the time has gone by that we're able to think more about it. Talking with our managers, talking with our budget analysis, talking with other people that used to be part of their own and then were absorbed into a municipal government, they would not recommend it, and they would not, they said that if we had the choice, we would stay as separate. Because there's some things that can be done by us that cannot be done as part of the government setting. For instance, a good example of this would be the salary increases I'd like to do. If I was part of the city, it'd have to be approved by HR, go through the systems of going through director up to assistant manager, and then most likely approved by city council. From that, 27% is a huge increase. With this, I can present to the board, I can say this is what I'd like to do, I can get some blessing, and then move forward on it. So there's some liberties such as that would go away. Pretty much the freedom to do those would go away for that. Next is animal control. So that's, well, what are we going to do with animal control if you don't want to be a part of it? That was the main drive, was becoming part of the city so that animal control would be with the center and we could better mandate what was going on. So my proposal is we do a Mesilla Valley Animal Care and Control. I'm not set on the name, it sounded good. So, but with that, we can have ACO education, specify specifically what needs to be done, and also change our approach a little bit. I think animal control has come a long way since I've gotten here, but we can do much more as far as the community approach. Let's be less enforcement, more of we're here to help, let's help you. However, in order for us to do that, we need more animal control officers. So with that, we're looking at 1 supervisor, 4 lead officers that would work, and then 7 additional ACOs with what they're already at full-time or fully staffed, 7 additional. We also would like them to have some office space at either the new center or at the existing center. We have some plans to put cubicles and things in the front lobby. Not necessarily plans, but thoughts, I should say, for that. All right, some critical needs. If many of you remember, we had a double-wide trailer that was west of the Animal Service Center, used as our medical facility. It was bad. We'll just leave it at that. So we got a grant for $77,000 to get rid of that double-wide trailer and get some type of cement slab and work in there, which we did. If you see, the purple is all existing work, and then the little yellow line going around is the trench. I don't know if you can see, there it is. Let's see if you can see my cursor, but the yellow line going around the purple is a trench there. That's a drain system. So what our proposal is to extend the cement out 10 feet, like it states here, and put kennels on both sides of that trench. So when somebody is cleaning in the front, the animal can be in the back. And it's going to be covered with the guillotine door, and vice versa when they're cleaning the other ways. So the cement work is $20,000. New kennels was quoted at $156,000. We need some air movement through there with some large industrial fans for outdoors, $6,000. And then a misting fan system, basically just one of those really large evaporated coolers, is $4,000 that can blow that cooler air around and circulate better. So in total, $186,000. That cannot be absorbed into the budget. Critical need, we would like to see this funded by next year, before next summer. It was incredibly difficult to house animals in this area this summer. If you want, Dr. Haddon can talk more on it, on the sickness and the issues of it, but as far as on a cleaning standpoint, it was next to impossible to keep it satisfactory. All right, next. On just left of, this is the picture of the new building of the Ascmv. Just left of the new building, so that would be west, this little, you see a square outlined here. It was a large gathering area that I'd like to have on the center, and it was one of the first things that was cut because of the value engineering, it's called. In other words, we need to cut things to afford the building, the necessities. This pretty much is just a box with a floor is all we're looking for. We just want an area where we can gather as in staff meetings. But also, I thought more than that. This could be more, have a door for the outside, and people could come in when the center's not open, like on holidays. And we could have dog training in there. We could do gatherings of groups want to meet. I mean, it's open as a community center, so, and fund it that way. Speaking with the city department that's building the new building, right now, it would, per square feet, I mean, we're looking, with this size, it would be $1.3 million to do it that way, and that is a lot. And the reason is anytime it's adjacent, there's a lot of codes to do with it. You have to have a bathroom in it, you have to have a certain number of exits, you have to, and so on. So, but I've moved that number over to our grant writer and looking at her to see if she can get multiple grants for a project like this, for a community center that would improve. I want people to come to the center. I don't want it to be a place where you bring your animal to put to sleep. Well, let's be a place where people like to come and visit and see the animals. And this will aid definitely for that. All right, so in review, we have a brand new department we want to create, community outreach. We have the education specialist, social media, trap, neuter, return, intake. We have some positions that we want to create as well, or new, add to. Front office, 5 full-time, 3 part-time. Kennel area, 8 full-time, 4 part-time. Each one of those full-time individuals is around $30,000 to $32,000. And the part-time, $17K for that. Medical department, 4 full-time, and that's around an average of about $34,000 to $35,000. With our administration, the 6 full-time, that includes the HR supervisor or the HR specialist, the supervisor for community outreach, and then all the community outreach positions. So total positions we are looking at is 23 full-time, 7 part-time, $865,000, and if you add about 11% for benefits, then you're looking at $955,000. Then we have to think about the computers, the cubicles, the emails, the supplies. All of this costs money to get things started. So we're looking at around $1 million increase is what we'll for the future. Now, this is not all at once. For instance, I can't start adding positions with no offices. I can't build something that's not ready to be built. However, as we start piecing these things in, I would like to have a healthy discussion with the board about the feasibility of funding these big picture items. And overall, thank you very much for listening. We're excited about the future that the Ascmv has, and I look forward to a discussion.
All right, thank you, Mr. Thacker. Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Clint, Mr. Thacker. So I have one question to begin with.
Oh, man, that's like one question.
Well, yeah, and my big question is, you're presenting to us all the wonderful things that the center should be, and I totally agree with your assessment. I have no grounds for disagreeing because I'm not in your position, but based on the needs that you've presented, it makes a lot of sense. The part I don't understand, and if you could please explain this to me as if I were a 4-year-old or maybe a 2-year-old, and you're familiar with those because you've had 8 of them, or 7 of those. You're asking to be independent, and so can you explain to me what it would mean to break away from the JPA and be totally independent from the city and the county? And that's what I saw, and that's what I understood. So explain to me how that would happen. We were supposed to have a work session on that, and I canceled a hair appointment that took me like 4 months to get, so this is what you get. But that's not the important part. The important part is that I was really looking forward to a profound discussion as to the dissolution of the JPA. And so if you could explain how you're asking on the one hand, this is what we need, and you're asking this board to do it. At the same time, you're dissolving the JPA, and the JPA would mean the dissolution of this board. And the financing and everything that's authorized by the state of New Mexico would go with it. So can you explain to me that dichotomy? I see it as a dichotomy.
Yes, ma'am. So I'm sorry if that came across as dissolving the JPA. That was never the mention of it. We wanted to keep the JPA, just revise it with some of those things that I mentioned in there. The addition would be is that I bring in animal control under us. So the city would no longer have animal control, or the county would no longer have animal control. It would be one unit, the Mesilla Valley Animal Care and Control, for all of it. But we would still have a JPA, the funding would still be there.
Oh, so what is it exactly? The JPA, I mean, so you want the JPA, but you want more autonomy. So we would still have a board that would be sitting up here once a month or quarterly, as you've requested, perhaps. So how would that work, Clint? How would, I mean, from, you know, from where I'm sitting, I don't understand. I can't visualize, I can't conceptualize, is a better word, how it would really function. And yeah, I mean, you want to break away from the JPA, but you don't?
No, I don't. There's no discussion about breaking away from
Well,
the
I mean,
JPA.
how? Okay.
It was a discussion of want to revamp the JPA and to turn it in so it includes, the JPA includes specific things, such as the Animal Service Center Mesilla Valley will provide animal care and control and for the Doña Ana County.
So we have to revamp the JPA and submit a new application to the state of New Mexico?
I don't think so. We would just need to,
I believe, Councilor Flores, it would be just looking at updating the current JPA with some of the things or the suggestions. And I believe that the reason for the discussion that Clint was bringing up is because I think he had prefaced it with, there was the discussion of the Ascmv going under the city. And so I think what he was just trying to say is that I think he would like to continue under the current board where it's a joint, where we have a JPA between the county and the city versus going completely under the city of Las Cruces. I think that's what I understood from the conversation. And that's
that is
where I think,
correct.
but he would like to have some addition, recommended some changes to the existing JPA.
Okay. Have you spoken with our city attorney? Oh, it's not your city attorney. Well, it's something that I would definitely have to ask city attorney or go to the state of New Mexico to find out whether it be a brand new application, because the terms would be different. A JPA is issued upon the terms that it's submitted to, that they receive, and these terms would be changing, and they're significant.
Yes.
And there's a lot of money involved. I mean, the new asks alone are over $1 million, which are wonderful. And believe me, if I had the money, if I was a Bloomberg, I'd write the check myself. But, you know, just a working person here, retired no less, it's kind of, sort of. But at any rate, I would like to further explore that. If you feel, Clint, and your staff believes with their expertise and the way you all work, that would be more efficient, then I would definitely, but we have to look at that. We have to look at and whether we'd have to do a brand new application to the state finance department of New Mexico. So I also wanted to ask you, Clint, what is an exempt employee? You say anyone earning more than $32,000 or $35,000 is no longer an exempt employee, and what is an exempt employee?
Exempt employee, there's two classifications of employee, exempt and non-exempt. Non-exempt, in a nutshell, can earn overtime. And an exempt employee is an individual who is salary-based, so that they get a check no matter how many hours they work, they get the same amount.
Okay.
And they cannot earn overtime.
Okay. And then your administration asks are an HR specialist who would be seated at located there at the animal center, and it would act as a liaison. And so, and you said that, and I think it sounds like a good idea, but I'm still not sure about this whole new, whatever. So the person would be taking care of, pretty much picking up the slack that our HR office isn't doing. I mean, call a spade a spade.
Yes.
And by the way, Mr. Assistant City Manager, that is prevalent throughout other departments. It's something that I learned shortly after I was elected. People were asking me to look into applications they had filed years before, not necessarily at the Animal Service Center, but in other departments. So that is something I hope we individually will take up with, well, we're not a quorum here anyway, as city councilors. So it's something that I've taken up with Mr. Peely, insofar as why it's taking so long. Not even a letter, like, you know, if you can sit and wait for 2 or 3 more years before we get to you, please hang on, type of letter, you know, just a courtesy letter after an application's been made. And thank you, Bernice, for all the work that you've done in addition to everything you're supposed to do. On top of that, you were doing payroll. And so everything, if you were to be your own, on your own, or under the terms of a new JPA, all of this would be covered, Clint?
Well, we would still, just like the existing JPA is that all finances, like payroll, are all handled by the city. And so that could stay as one of the things, is that the city is our fiscal manager.
Yeah.
Because if not, we would lose our auditing, we would lose all those things, and then we'd have to go search out for those our own.
Right. And insofar as, there's so much information you presented today. And I, by the way, I want to, you know, really applaud you, or, you know, your proposals are laudatory. I think that it's wonderful that you want to do all these things to make the center more efficient and run smoothly, and your employees are happy, and I believe in happy employees. You have happy employees, you have a good production, and also a safe place for our little critters. So I do have other questions, but perhaps my colleagues will ask them, and it'll be covered, I'm sure, in what they're asking. And thank you very much, Clint, for your presentation. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilor Flores. Vice Chair.
Mr. Chairman?
Commissioner Alonso, we'll go to Vice Chair Betisuvi, and then we'll come back to you, Commissioner Alonso.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Clint. I know I was one person who had asked about short-term and long-term vision as I got onto the board about 1.5 years ago. And I think we oftentimes get so wrapped up in the day-to-day and just managing that we need to start somewhere to look for the future. And I am very pleased with a lot of what you've put down, and looking at making sure that we have equitable wages, and looking at that community outreach piece as well. I think there is a lot that we need to work on. And looking at the TNR piece, and I know we're going to speak about that later, but we know as we make choices and ordinances, even on council, we want these to be successful, and that requires coordination. And when we first spoke about this, the only comment and concern that I did bring up was that of the JPA and looking at that. I know my fellow colleagues on the council, we've been trying to be very innovative and looking at ways that we can help partner and look at that future perspective of what does it mean for the center. And that's with our GO bonds. That's when issues happen that the city is picking up a lot of those extra pieces. And so if we are to stay as a JPA, I would want to say that I'd love to see what type of collaboration we can have with the county that helps us match those needs that the city is providing as well. You know, we are expanding in many ways. We are going to need new employees, and it is all for the benefit of the people, not only in the city, but for the county as well. The ideas of ACOs that are cross-trained that can go through the city and the county is something that I think will help with staffing and will lead to probably better management as well, and hopefully less stress on the ACOs if we can have more employees like that. So there's a lot of pieces and parts to this, and I think we have to start somewhere with the conversation, so today is a great day to do that. But looking forward, I'd love to hear, at least if not today, but take some time, but talk with the county on what they see with their plan on helping improve the service is and what type of responsibilities and fiscally and otherwise to help with this.
Thank you.
And thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Commissioner Allens.
Clint, could you go back to the joint powers agreement slide, please? What does remain separate from city and county mean?
That means that the JPA will stay in place because there was talk of bringing the Ascmv into the city and then dissolving the JPA. So my proposal is that we keep the JPA, revise it, and have animal control, both from the city and the county, come into the Ascmv.
It's the word separate that I'm asking about.
All right, I can take it out. It's
I mean, I'm not sure, how are we separate? In what sense?
when I wrote it, I was thinking of to remain separate from the city, or in other words, to stop coming into the city. I wanted to, it's a bad word choice, I understand that. I just wanted to be certain that you understand that we no longer want to be part of the city. Let's keep the JPA and move forward there.
Because you're still going to get appointees from the city council and from the county commission, presumably.
Yeah, this board would stay.
You said that your average turnover was about 2 years. What kinds of positions turn over more frequently and less frequently?
Our biggest turnover is animal caregivers. As you can imagine, that is an incredibly hard job to do. Cleaning in adverse conditions and also cleaning adverse things. You're basically spraying animal waste down a drain and working hard on getting animals to stay healthy, and there's a lot of pressure on you. We also have front office staff where it's always their fault that the dog got impounded, and they get taken out on, they get yelled at. It's a hard job to have. Some of our longest ones, of course, is management positions. That keep that up. I have one manager that's been there over 10 years. So
this is a pretty expensive menu that you've presented. From whence comes the money?
it would be from the city and the county. And that's the discussion that Councilor Stubbe was saying, Vice Chair, was that discussion needs to happen of how it's going to work out. And I'd love to have the discussion too, because we're looking at a city building that we're going to be moving into. It's paid for by city residents, but housing county animals, and it's a discussion that needs to happen regardless.
These are your druthers, but is it still in the works that the city will take over the animal shelter and the county will basically be charged per animal or some such formula?
Well, with this presentation that I've said, and that's the discussion about the word separate, I do not want the city to absorb the Ascmv. In other words, I'm saying no longer. I want to work, so instead of being like them, like the city and county, I want it to be the Ascmv and city and county to work together.
Well, that's what you want, but what's it going to be for the moment?
Well, right now, it's the city and the county and the Ascmv.
Well, my understanding was that the city will take over the animal shelter, this board would be dissolved, and
I think that's
the county would be charged a fee per animal that's brought in.
I think that's where it was going, but no longer. On me. I mean, the city, I'm speaking out of the side of my mouth here, I guess, but any party can dissolve the JPA with written notice. I can't stop that, but the executive director of the Ascmv is standing here saying that let's not dissolve the JPA, let's revise it, and let's work together.
But you don't have the final say.
Correct.
So to be continued then. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Alves. Mayor Pro Tem Gondra?
Yeah, thank you, Clint. I appreciate your presentation and all the work that you and your staff have provided. I know it's a lot. And so, Clint, have you had an opportunity to speak to Mr. Enriquez and to the city, to include County Manager Macias, about your thoughts on this? Because probably now 4 years, I would say, 3.5 years, we've been speaking of, okay, what is the best way to handle this? Knowing that, you know, the GEO bond was in place, knowing that the last budget, the city put forth quite a bit of money, and in addition to the money that we put forth. And so I think there was the discussion 2 and 3 managers ago that we are considering dissolving, right, the GPA and it coming into the city of Las Cruces. So I guess I want to hear from you in terms of the number of conversations, and then hear from Mr. Enriquez exactly what is being discussed at the executive level, because I hear the rumblings, right? I hear that ACO is being moved or going to be moved into different places, but that really hasn't been discussed further. So all this is like a puzzle piece that, right, that isn't quite fitting yet. So give me your interpretation.
I've had really good discussions with the city manager, Mr. Peely. I've had 1 or 2 meetings with the assistant city manager, and the one with Eric Vest, the assistant city manager, was not worrisome to me, but when he said that they're thinking of moving animal control underneath another department, and I said, whoa, the whole reason why I'm saying that I want to do this was so we could have animal control, so we could work more towards changing that department to be something that it's not. And so that actually got me started thinking, let's think about a better and other way to do that. And when I talk, like I said, with other directors, where they had this type of a setup, where they were getting funding from city and county, et cetera, that they said that they wish they hadn't gone in. They would have liked to stay separate so they can do more things with it, as I said before. And also different ways to go about it. You know, and that's why I said, why can't it be have the county and the city animal control under the JPA? Why does it have to be this? I go to the city and have the city, and then just have the city. And because then if we ever do absorb, the county ACOs would have to be part of the city, and they don't want that, or they might not want that, I should say. So that was my thinking is that let's figure out another way to make the same result.
Have you talked to the ACOs about this?
No,
Okay.
I have not.
So this is the first time they're hearing this.
I mentioned to Gino yesterday about it because we had a good discussion in my office. Maybe it's come up in a conversation once or twice, but not in this level, no.
So in all actuality, you're talking about 2 departments, really, 2 new departments, not just 1, 2. You would have the ACOs under you as well, and the discussion would have to be had with the city and county about how that would happen, frankly. And so you would be still factoring into your budget what it costs each of those ACOs. And I thought I heard at one point the difficulty about doing that almost immediately when David Dallahan was here is because the city ACO versus what the county ACOs pay is very different, or different. I wouldn't say very different, but it's different. Was that accurate?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, I know that the pay is different for them. But as far as me, like I said, I'm raising the wages of my staff, so I don't see it as a reason of complication that we would just bring them in as you're going to be making this much. Starting off, taking consideration of years of service and everything like that, implement some type of protocol that would bring them in on that.
Well, some sort of wage analysis of sorts that we do normally, right, as we're raising wages. I try to say that a few times fast. That we're raising wages for others. You know, there's some sort of analysis that takes place, and you're factoring in regionally what others make, that kind of thing. So, you know, I have always felt it a bit disjointed, that our ACOs come from, you know, different organizations, and as much as I think past boards and the JPA have tried to make ordinances and such look the same, it's different, and I find it, you know, we get those morning and evening updates, and here, you know, we're at cross purposes, right? It doesn't feel like we are really working at times together to keep animals out of the center and keep them safe, and whatever at times, and even in presentation, right? It just feels differently. And so I have always been a fan of coordinating and collaborating and bringing in people as a team. And I think this would be the best way to do it, is to have the ACO, that conversation, to see how we bring the ACOs into the Animal Services Center. I think that would be really helpful in my mind, as in terms of the mission. And then you made mention that the mission has to change, right? What currently is the mission of the Animal Services Center? And it would require sort of a strategic planning session, in my mind, if we're going to move it out of this, that we do that, and that we understand sort of what the mission is, because it's different.
Yes. And also to add to that, I forgot to mention in the presentation that in my previous place I worked at Davis County, we had 14 different cities that I was over, and almost all of them had different ordinances. Because some of them were just like it is here. Some were more livestock, some were more city, rural, et cetera. And so I didn't have officers assigned to specific areas. It was officers wherever they were at the time got the call and they reported to it. And it was just a matter of knowing where you were at. And then you had a cheat sheet of what are the specific ordinance changes. And so they knew what ordinance numbers to write, what for citations if needed be, or even what the ordinances were. And with the city and the county, the two mirror so close anyways, it would not be difficult at all to be able to manage that for the ACOs.
Thank you, Clint. And so talk further about the liberty. Some liberties would go away and then move into, in terms of the ability to manage intakes with emergency only. What, I mean, don't you do that to a certain extent?
No, the only way that I was able to manage any type of intakes was during the pandemic, where we said we need to limit the animals coming in so there's less exposure of people coming to the center, and also the staffing level. We didn't know what was going to happen. You know, if staff got really ill, then we need to have animals, only the ones that need to come in. And under the emergency basis, then I had collaboration on that. But like with right now, as you saw, our live release rate was 65%. That's the lowest it's almost ever been in August. And the reason is because we have so many animals coming in. We're talking 30, 40 animals a day coming into the center. And are these animals that really needed to come to the center? And I asked that question because we're euthanizing animals more. Well, I don't have the staff to, even if I was fully staffed, we are not at that capacity of care. The animals are not getting the quality care that they should get. So we need to euthanize more in order to have the number down to get to that quality of care. And that's why I would like that to be in the JPA, is if we get a certain number of animals, like let's just say I have 10 employees, and with the 10 employees, 100 animals can be cared for. So once we get to that 100 animals, our quality of care, our capacity of care is going to drop when we go above it. And that's what we like to have the JPA. We could say, we're at capacity. Please, officers, impound emergencies only. Injured, sick, aggressive. The ones that really have to come to the center, let's bring them in. But the others, let's not. And then once we get down below that number, then we can resume regular impounding as before.
So Clint, with that comment that you just made, that we understand because of the pandemic and such, I often hear commentary from staff and the ACOs that it makes it difficult because of the laws, right, that the state has. That have you done sort of an analysis of what laws we might be breaking when adding something like this? Because obviously I'm not versed on that. It's not my job to to know all of those things. I mean, although I know some, I would feel like if you're going to put something like this, I think there's probably policies from city and county, but also the state that we have to really look at and understand before we make such a drastic move in this to this specific area.
And it's a fantastic point and definitely needs to be addressed and looked at for that.
Okay, all right, thank you. Let's see. I took a bunch of medical. The area, the critical needs, would you say that this is sort of top? Like if you had to prioritize these things, I know this is sort of your pie in the sky, so to speak, but if you had to prioritize things, it would be helpful to know what those are. Almost immediately, I think I heard very specifically that this has to happen soon. Is that accurate?
I think number one priority is going to be the salary increase for our staff.
Okay.
That's the number one. And luckily, this first year, so the half of that percentage, can be absorbed. So we're going to implement that as soon as we can.
Okay.
As soon as we can figure out an equitable manner to give increase to everybody. Once we figure that out, then we will be distributing that increase out. But this definitely is second. I mean, we've already gotten quotes for the cement. We've already gotten quotes for the new kennels. And the ceiling fans and misting fans were amounts that I gathered online. Online, off of online. So those are pretty good hard numbers there.
Absolutely, and this is where you're this right here, you're referring to what has been the down under, right?
No, this is where the house was, the double wide. It's the green,
yes,
it's
yes,
the green
yes,
roof
yes.
area right
Yes,
now.
yes, okay, got it. Thank
Yep.
you, thank you. And then as the new center is being built, it appears like maybe we got to get ready in terms of staffing, correct?
Yes.
And so move back to the slide so I can see, and for folks that are watching and.
Which slide do you want to go to?
Oh, I'm sorry, the FTEs for new positions. I would assume that's to help fill, right? As we build the new center, you're saying this is what we really need to help with that.
Yes. Yeah, so some of it's more urgent than others. Like with the front office, you see 3 additional part-time, because the goal there is to use those part-time positions for more offsites. So we don't need those immediately for the new center. However, the 5 additional full-time employees for the front, we do need, because we have to house in both areas for the new center and the existing center. So a small increase there. And then the kennels, the 5 additional animal caregivers, those, of course, are needed as soon as possible. We can have 5 additional kennel workers in the existing kennel and then just schedule them over. That's no problem at all. So that is definitely a need. But like the building maintenance doesn't need to come until after the building's completed or closer to. And a rescue coordinator isn't an absolute need right now. That can wait until we get into the new center. So we're looking at the new center will be done they say, in September of 2022. So anytime after, in that next fiscal year.
A year from now,
Yeah.
right? So as we're talking about budget, and I see Leanne back there, and Mr. Staple is still here, Mr. Enriquez is here, we need to start looking at that and what is the total amount that we're, so I guess I'm asking you, prioritize what you need for this next fiscal year, and we're starting to talk about that. And it would be helpful to me, right? How many FTEs, part-time, full-time, with a total number so that we can start negotiating that. And then the conversations, I think, need to be had between the city and county if it is, in fact, how we want to proceed.
That is great. Thank you. Yes, I'll get that to you.
Okay. And
So to
then,
reiterate, just so we're on the same page, prioritize the things that we really need for the new center coming up. Because I said, like, not all 8 full-timer for the kennels needs to be done. Okay, we'll get that.
I'm not sure, I mean, you tell me what you think you need to ensure the care of the animals and to try to maintain, retaining your folks, staffing. I think the salaries is a must. I agree with that. So you would have to be working with HR, I'm assuming, to assist in that manner. I don't see HR here today, but I would imagine there's certain protocol and such that needs to be followed because you follow you follow, the HR policies that the city has. Yes? Or no?
It's a little bit looser for us. Like, again, there's not an approval process. I'm the approval process. So I don't need to go to the assistant city manager or something like that. I basically send a memo saying we need to increase these to this amount, and it's completed by HR.
Got it. Okay, good. Okay, and then, an amount for me would be helpful. And then I guess I feel like I'm at a loss because I don't know how many conversations have been had with County Manager Macias and the county. I mean, I hear sort of the rumblings about that they want to move completely away and do their own thing. You started to see some of that. I don't know that that's accurate or not, but I think we've been asking for some time now to have a joint meeting between us, to have this conversation, transparently in front of the public. I talked some with Chair Sanchez, but I feel like we really need to have a robust conversation and really put it out there.
Agreed.
Okay.
Thank you.
And I think that's all my questions for now, Chair Sanchez. And I do see Mr. Macias here, and his hand is going up, so I'm not sure if he wants to come to the podium and have the conversation, if you're allowing that, Chair, or not till the end. I'm not sure what your thought was about obtaining information from County Manager Macias to include the city.
No, if County Manager Macias would like to provide some input, I'm open to that. I think, my hope was I know we would have some high-level conversations within, I think, around what Clint and what the future of the Ascmv was. I was hoping we wouldn't go too far down the rabbit hole, so to speak, but I think it's still, if Mr. Macias, if you would like to provide some input.
Mr. Chairman, I would like to provide some input, but at the end of the question, provide the members of the board.
Okay, so are we saying at the end of this topic or at the end of the meeting?
No, at the end of this topic.
Okay, fair enough, so we'll do that. And I have Councilor Flores, I'll come back to here in a second. I had a couple of questions, and I think Mayor Pro Tem Gondara had hit a little bit on it. What I would love to see is when we're looking at the priorities and timing of some of the staff, kind of what you're seeing or what you would look at in terms of bringing them on board or when you would look to bring them on board is one. The second part is in terms of the budget. I know you had indicated that some of the staffing and the increases could be encompassed within the current budget or within the current Ascmv budget, but so I'd be curious to understand overall, I guess, a summary of what would be the one-time capital upgrades that we're looking at versus the recurring staffing increases that we'd be looking at. So overall, what's the impact to the budget, and where are we looking at those impacts? But I think, you know, I think Councilor Flores had said this, which is I think overall, I love to see the ideas that you've brought forward, because I think when we've had discussions in the previous ASCmv board meetings, we're struggling on the county side and the city side in terms of staffing our ACOs. And I know we're both of our organizations are looking to get those filled. But in the meantime, you know, I could see a benefit in which if there was one organization for ACOs, and say an example like you had, I'll call it the MVAC based off of the acronym you had there. I could see some, you know, potentially where I know there's things that have to be worked out. And I know you've hit some of those topics, but I think from a execution and how we could serve the community, I could see some potential for that to be a good thing, because in the cases like this where, you know, if it's a staffing level, if you have hotspots in the county, the city, wherever it may be, that would give some flexibility as to where, you know, you could flex the staff to do that. The other part is I think is and this may have been brought up as well, I think when we were talking on those updates that we see in the morning and the afternoons, with the education piece, if, you know, we're seeing cases and sometimes you know, something's not filled out properly, or this wasn't done, or this, and so it creates rework on both, you know, for the ASCmv, it creates rework for the county, the city, whatever it may be, which is really inefficient, I think. And that's one of the things that I see is there's a chance to make things a little more efficient from that perspective. So I could see, you know, I'd love to see, you know, having the discussion. I don't know if it'll go there, you know, fully, but I'd be open to I think everything that you've brought up. I just would like to see is what kind of funding requirements would be needed from both the county and the city, when we'd be looking at it, and, you know, so that way we can continue on those discussions to see what are we looking at. And then the third part would be, we had some high-level ideas on the JPA and changes you'd like to see. So I'd like to get like maybe a list of those, so that way we can maybe take a deeper dive in that, because I think as we're talking here, the JPA is a big topic that we really need to revisit and understand where we sit between the city and the county, and we can work together to make sure we're in agreement in the end of everything that we're looking at. So
Thank you.
But I think I appreciated this conversation. I know, Councilor Flores, I think you have a couple more questions, so I'll just finish my bit here with just a comment in that I appreciated this conversation, this review, because I think it touches on so many different topics that we've been wanting to. I think one, your vision, the JPA, you know, so this has kind of given us a very good jumping off point to kind of push us into these discussions further. So
yes,
I appreciate it, Mr. Thacker. Councilor Flores, did you have additional questions? Oh, sorry, and then we'll come back to you, Commissioner Allens.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Clint, you alluded to rumblings that the city wants to take over, and I am not privy to that. What I have said personally is that the city has done a lot for that animal service center. We have our tax dollars going to it with the GO bond money that was raised for the new center. That's tax dollars from residents in the city of Las Cruces. We own the land. We owned, you know, the new service center is on city land. The existing center is on city land. We own the buildings. And it looks like, and I don't know I don't have all the details as to, I mean, you have your budget, but anyway, you know, we also do, the city does the payroll, the city does the HR services, you know, good, bad, or indifferent, the city does it and owns it literally and figuratively. So I just wanted to say that if there was any rumbling in the past about the city wanting to take over, you may have heard it from me, or you may have understood just because it seemed like it would make more sense. But this is something that has to be addressed, and we have to have a full board, robust, as Mayor Pro Tem Gandara has pointed out. It has to be a robust conversation. Everybody has to put their cards on the table. I'm sorry that Macias just walked out right now, county manager. And I also want to see in that discussion, what we have to keep in mind, as Councilor Aveda Stuvey pointed out, there has to be a equitable agreement. In other words, if that JPA is going to be revamped, or if it, just people, because you're absolutely correct about that, it can be dissolved unilaterally by either party at any time, with proper notice. So if the parties now to that JPA agree to an equitable distribution of costs and responsibilities, there's no reason to say no to that. But those are the sorts of things, and I think the key word is equitable, as Councilor Aveda Stuvey pointed out. I, in my humble opinion, do not believe it's been equitable, and so I just wanted to add that part. I want to emphasize, the equity or the equitability that hasn't really existed heretofore. And so I'm glad you're back, County Manager Macias. I would like to see the county, because even what you show, we contribute, the city contributes less than the county. And I don't even know, I'm not privy to whether the county pays up right away. All I know is that all these terms that we will revamp, if it's at all possible, Clint, because again, I don't know what the Department of Finance would require, but I have to put, I'm just speaking bluntly and maybe shooting myself in the foot and not making myself very popular, but those are the concerns I've had. And but as you've said, your understanding is that the JPA doesn't have to be dissolved to have you and everybody at the service center do the job that must be done, which you've delineated beautifully. And again, I want to thank everybody who has done the work, ACOs, administration, everybody who has really done a fantastic job, notwithstanding all these issues we have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Councilor Flores. Commissioner Ellens?
Clint, could you go back to the JC? Okay, it remains separate from the city and county, some liberties that would go away. What does that mean? Could you explain that?
As we stated before, it's like the salary increase that I like to do for my staff. The liberty of saying, me, the executive director, would like this to be done, and write a memo to HR and it's done, versus having to go through the steps of going through and getting the approval of the assistant city manager. If I was a member of the city, I'd have to go through the assistant city manager, who would be my supervisor. They'd have to talk about it with HR. It'd have to go probably up to the city manager, possibly city council because it's so large, and then get approved. So it's just some more liberties that I have, that the hoops that don't have to be jumped through if we were to remain a JPA.
Okay, I thought you meant that liberties that the board can exercise would go away.
It's confusing, Clint, and so is the other one.
Is that better?
You still have to, you say some liberties that would go away. No, you want more liberties, you want more autonomy. I think that's what you're asking for. You're asking for autonomy.
To keep it, yes. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, also, one quick thing is there is, Madam Flores, there is a administrative charge that we do pay to the city. I believe it's 75,000. Leanne, do you know off the top of your head what it is? I think it's, yeah, close to 100 grand that we pay the city. Now, in years past, the city has forgiven that so we could meet budget, but we do pay that amount for services rendered by the city.
Why haven't we seen it on our, or Mr. Sappel?
It's there.
Okay, then I haven't seen it, I'm sorry.
Okay, we'll go Mayor Pro Tem Gandara, and then I think after that, we'll let Mr. Macias go ahead and.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Clint. I do want to ask in terms of the priorities, or to say out loud that I feel really strongly as well that we need to get that mobile unit going. We've promised that over the years. It's going to help, I think, in relation to, our, spay and neuter, the microchip, all those things that I think that strap us from really getting the work done, I think, collectively. So in that priority list, where does that fall, and what is the amount of money that it's going to take to get this off the ground? Because I don't think I saw a price.
There was not a price there, and that was for a reason. Because the county has a mobile clinic that they're restocking and doing. I know Mary Lou's working really hard on getting it up and going. I don't know where they're at in that process, but I don't know if we want to duplicate efforts and us get our own and spend that money, or if that's something we can partner with the county and help do through those services. And then you also have to look at the staff to do that. Again, it's not just a matter of going and doing it. We are so overwhelmed. I wish I should have taken a picture of our surgery hallway. Every single day we have feral cats in shelving that is waiting to go out, and sometimes they wait as long as 2 days, and we don't want that. The whole reason for the program is to save lives and get them out as soon as possible. So I don't even know if it would be possible, and if we want, we can have Dr. Haddon come up and talk, but to be able to do one right now with our current staffing level. So some things have to happen before we step into that realm.
No, absolutely, and I think that's why you presented sort of the FTEs and this process, and why another thing I think we need to add to the list in terms of having this conversation with the county, right? As much as we can, I think the public expects us to work together. Coordinate, collaborate, trying to reduce the use of the amounts of money that it's creating, right? If we can coordinate and concisely do this work, if you will. The other thing is, have you ever considered capital outlay funding from the state and what that might look like moving forward? I don't see that here, and that would be a recommendation that I have for you moving forward. As you know, our state is pretty flush with money, or will be, or continues to be, and I think this is something that you should really consider.
That's a great idea.
Moving forward, I think. And then lastly, it requires being put on our list and such, or the counties, or both, but those conversations should be had soon, Clint, so that we can get on the list if we're not already. So
thank you.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gandara. County Manager Macias, would you care to?
Chair Sanchez.
Mr. Niquez.
I was going to say, if I could speak before County Manager, just to answer some of Mayor Pro Tem Gandara's questions on the discussions that took place, if you don't mind, or?
Yeah, that's fine, Mr. Niquez.
Okay, so in the past, there was discussions of the JPA being dissolved and the city taking over. And those were previous discussions in the past, and then just when I came into this position back in November, there were still some of those things that were, as Mayor Pro Tem said, some grumblings, but or rumblings that were taking place, but still it was unclear. I thought it'd be best if, and Mr. Thacker had tried to schedule a work session to try to bring it up to the board and see where the board felt this was going before it went to a joint meeting between the city and county, to start with the board and see where the board felt if the JPA should remain, or any updates, amendments, and all that would be a process. There is a process with all that. So that's where it began, and I thank Mr. Thacker for coming in and bringing his plan. It looks like a good long-term plan. I totally agree with the consolidation of resources that can best provide for this community. I just want to say there is some challenges with the animal control. As one, they are represented by the union, and two is they're sworn by the police department for any criminal activity. So those would be some discussions that could move forward. But I think the key point is, does the board want the JPA to remain? And I think that's what the whole discussion is for this board. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Enriquez. Okay. Mr. Macias.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. Just a few observations. I won't take that long. I wanted to thank Commissioner Allens. He is the one that suggested that I be here to listen to this discussion, because candidly, we haven't been part of listening in to the discussions. So let me suggest one thing to you to begin with. And I compliment Mr. Thacker and his staff in terms of trying to visioning out some of the needs. But it is no different than going through a budget hearing process. And we have already arrived, both the city and the county, at what the budget is for this given fiscal year. I'm going to suggest to you that any time, and this is not in a derogatory manner, but any time that you are asked to create 30-plus positions, when you're dealing with departments within the city or within the county, where you're basically telling your departments, we can't give you any additional positions, then I think that part of the disconnect is looking at the big picture and where we're going to be. So let me suggest to you that the city and the county, moving very quickly, basically bring in a management assessment team that has that kind of expertise in the operations, these kind of operations, these kind of joint operations, and that be jointly funded by the city and the county. And I think that it can come in at a reasonable rate, because both the city and the county have done probably a substantial amount of management assessments of individual departments within both the city and the county. A group that would be independent, answerable to this committee, to this board, and within a 6-month period, come up with recommendations in terms of not only how to proceed, but how to operate. Because as you talk about the need for more money, you talk about the expansion of the operations, there needs to be, just as importantly, the discussion about how you limit the number of animals that are coming into the Animal Services Center. There needs to be a little bit more of a robust discussion about how do you utilize all of the different animal advocacy groups in the community. Something that comes to mind when we talk about community outreach. Why aren't we looking to contract some of them? Why aren't you looking to contract a public relations firm, and that's a broad category, to basically do some of your community outreach? Because when you compare that cost to the cost of 5 full-time employees with all of the benefits and everything else associated with it, you may find more effective or financially effective methods of communicating within the public. I do want to thank Councilor Flores for at least bringing up the topic of the JPA. That is the priority. I agree with Mr. Enriquez. Certainly the priority internally may be related to employees and their compensation level, but from a much broader perspective, it is where are we going? Are we going to maintain this relationship, or is it going to be substantially changed? I can guarantee you, and I don't mean this disrespectfully, when I first came on as county manager, and it's almost 4 years ago, there were already these discussions about how city and county animal control were going to be merged together. It was going to be under, there was a different process to it. But it was made very bluntly clear to me that the city was headed toward dissolving the JPA and eventually transitioning, after several years of the county continuing to contribute millions of dollars to the process, that the county would be then charged per animal. I am absolutely clear to you that that was communicated to me. That is why the county has been looking at undertaking effort to diminish the number of animals being brought in, and because of all of the challenges internally related to the care or the euthanasia of animals. So I want to assure everybody, neither from the commission level or management level at the county, have we ever been advocating the abolishment of the JPA. To me, it is a testimony of two governmental entities being unable to work with one another. When Mr. Feely first was appointed and we had our first conversation, this was one of the conversations. We should look to see what we need to do to basically address the animal population and animal services jointly and not separately. So if the modification of the JPA, yes, it has to go to the Department of Finance and Administration, but their review of it is solely to determine whether or not it is financially feasible, whether you have a method of funding those changes, whether it makes financial sense to accomplish the stated purpose of the JPA. So I'm not saying that the Department of Finance and Administration just does a cursory review. Their review is somewhat limited, and they are always looking to say, does it make sense, and have the city and the county made sure that they've covered their bases properly. So I don't see any kind of effort to modify the Joint Powers Agreement as being an impediment or even a long-delayed method of accomplishing those modifications. I do want, because I haven't heard any differently from our commissioners, that we continue to work together. But I think that all of these issues that are now being presented, I think that it's good to have a little bit more of an independent review and process and levels of recommendation, because I know that we can have joint meeting of the city and the county, but to discuss what? This broad array of different priorities, or to discuss concrete proposals that are being made to you. So I tend to favor come in to a public meeting with a tangible recommendation in terms of how to proceed and to be able to justify it, to see the cost of it, and if there are any kind of alternatives to that approach. And if there's any way to assess what you currently have to make it more effective. So let me suggest to you that you at least consider, because we recently did a very comprehensive review of our community development and our permitting process. We brought in a consultant to look at it very critically in terms of the permitting process and the criticisms that we received and the competition with El Paso related to Santa Teresa. And we have been implementing those very concrete proposals. I find it a very effective approach and would suggest that you consider that as well. I'm very happy to respond to questions related to the county's perspective. We are going to be utilizing our mobile clinic. We certainly have plans. We've already done a review of it. It's the vehicle is in very good shape. It needs very little modification to basically get it operating. We have wanted to look at a test pilot project down in Chaparral to see if we can kind of have the impact that we'd like to see in terms of an aggressive spay and neuter program through the mobile operation to make sure that we can justify or determine whether the investment of financial investment in that process shows us a return in terms of the reduction of animals that are being picked up by animal control. So yes, there are a lot of efforts, but I can assure you that there hasn't been the appropriate and extensive dialogue at the management level that needs to occur first, from my perspective, before concrete matters or recommendations are brought to the board or the respective council and commission. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Macias. Okay, is there any other input before we, on the topic? I know there's going to be, we'll have to continue on discussions with the JPA. I think that's the outcome of this discussion, so we'll have to look at scheduling something, whether it's just with the staff or we'll have some discussions on that. All right, if there's no other input at the moment, I'll move on. Oh,
Mr. Chair.
Vice Chair Bates-Stubbe.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And just one thing to mention that I do think, granted, there's been a lot of changes over the last apparently 4 years in staffing, in counselors, and different things. And I do want to say that we have to start a conversation somewhere and at some point and at some time. And I do really want to say thank you to everybody that's participating right now, from staff to council and to this board, for beginning those conversations in very transparent ways. It seems like perhaps that wasn't always the case, and it was done in closed doors or in stilted ways where nothing was ever able to get done. So though this is a tedious process, I do want to say thank you, because I think this is where we begin, and we can hold ourselves accountable to start that process a little bit quicker, get a decision made one way or another, and that way we're not waiting another 4 years before we decide what to do again. I think that's good for staff, that's good for the center, and it's good for us to be able to make the best decisions we can while we're here. So thank you, and thank you, Chair.
Mr. Chair, if I may.
Mayor Pro Tem Gondra.
Thank you. So risk of sounding combative, I appreciate the conversation that, or the comments from Mr. Macias, but I've sensed an anger or frustration, and I've known him a long time. I call him Judge, so I hope that's not the case, but I'm going to put that out there. And frankly, it's disturbing to me that, and I've always have said to Clint and others, because I chaired this a few years ago as well, and so that I expect for him to have these deep conversations with the management of the prospective county and city moving forward. I don't think it should be a shock to anybody that, yes, I think over the years there have been transition. And to be frank, the Animal Services Center does have a marketing team through Wilson and Brinkley. It's a very small contract that, if you remember, I asked to have more money put into it because I think it's essential that we do in terms of how we market and do provide sort of the marketing and techniques and such, something that I feel Clint and his staff don't have the time, to do. But frankly, I do want to say, and I'll have to say this clearly, the city, our constituents approved a GEO bond, a quite hefty GEO bond, to actually design and build the new Animal Services Center. And somewhere down the way, we have to ask the county to give us funding for that, and not just per animal, but because we use the facility. I know, and frankly, there's a lot of issues and concerns. I get the emails every morning and every afternoon about how the ACOs do their job or don't do their job. And then there's all this discourse, I think, in terms of how do we promote that? And frankly, you know, I'm in charge of Clint, as you all are, but not of the ACOs. And I have a lot of conversations with past managers, current managers. I send things out, not so much because I feel it's our executive team here, you know, to do some of that. And so I don't know that at the end of the day, I was promoting to, you know, to move out of the JPA, absolve the JPA. But I think we need to coordinate and collaborate. I think we need to have really transparent conversations. I know from the city standpoint, we've developed task force to hear and to have these discussions. And frankly, at the beginning, before Clint was hired, there was a lot of discourse. And now that Clint is hired, I feel like a lot of that has resolved through very transparent conversations. So I feel there's some disconnect from, you know, the three entities, and we got to tighten that up. And I'm asking Clint to be the leader in making sure that takes place. Moving forward. And so I want to be very clear from the board's perspective, the recommendations that I see need to happen so that this is timely moving forward. And I've asked for a work session, a joint work session. I've asked for Clint to have those conversations with, very clear conversations with the city manager and the county about the ACOs and what we do to be working more as a team. And then that we have a strategic planning session, because it sounds like we have to change our mission to a degree to see this come to fruition. I'm not in disagreement of looking at the possibility of hiring a management consultant, if you will, to look at how we, you know, how we look at the work that our Animal Services Center is doing, how we can tighten things up. I don't think that's a bad idea, and I'd like to hear from Clint a little more. But I want to come out of here with very clear recommendations so Clint knows very specifically what his next steps are. I don't want to sound wishy-washy, and sometimes I think we do. And I'll say that from my perspective, from my own, that I sound sometimes wishy-washy, and he leaves here maybe not sure of what to do next. But I don't want there to be, because we're going to have a new council in November. God willing, no, but there's an election, so there could be another shakeup of who sits on this board. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gandara. Councilor Flores.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Gandara. Yes, there might be a change, and so that's another issue regarding continuity. So what we need between now and the end of December, Clint, is exactly what Mayor Pro Tem asked for. We need to call we as a board, or we need to bring the two entities together. And it would be a joint work session that we would prioritize, we would prioritize totally. And it's really hard, and I don't mean this for any other reason except to, you know, it is what it is. I personally sit on about 14 boards, task forces, PRCs, advisory board liaison, you name, I'm on minimally 14. And then there's meetings that we have, and we have to be very careful when we have meetings. We meet with EFO City Manager Peely once a month, one-on-one, but he has an open door, and we're free to go in and discuss things all the time. And, well, open door doesn't mean, well, in my case, I just barge in. Hi, Ifo. But we do set meetings. And so when one thing gets changed, and I said it flippantly about having to change that hair appointment, but you have to understand my hair was burned when they did it last time. And then I cut it up to here at Christmas time, and it's grown out. My hair grows fast. And that was flippant, I'm sorry. But I do have other things coming up, like eye surgery, recovery, and another important, very important event in my life that I can't share openly. If we set a meeting, I beg you to please make sure we have it, because we run ourselves ragged. And when we had Zoom, it was a little bit easier just to, okay, flip over to the next meeting. And now we have to travel, cross town and, 4 points here. So that would be my ask and my directive, or what we should do, I would recommend to the board, I guess we're the ones that have to call it, is that we call for a meeting between the two parties to discuss the JPA and do that as soon as it's reasonable, feasible, given all of our respective calendars and demands. How do we go about that? Just by my saying that, Mr. Chair, or do I get my magic wand out again? Or?
Well, I think my recommendation is that I believe the first step in my mind would be that each of our administrations could meet with each other, because I think if we have a work session that comes up with the JPA, I think we need to understand what's the outcome of that, and without them having at least some thought as to the direction we're going to go, the direction of a presentation or of what recommendations would be to the board, I can't say. I mean, we can have discussions all day, and I think we'd go back, to have those types of negotiations in the open, we can do that. But my concern is that if we don't have at least those initial preparation and discussion, and maybe that's what we do, maybe we look in October, November timeframe to set something up so that we have the time in advance for those conversations to happen. I think that would just be, at the pleasure of the board to determine that work session. But I think we should give time. Well, my recommendation would be in November.
Okay. I suppose we can do that in November, but because you're saying, with all due respect, Mr. Chair, you're saying that we can't meet until they meet. And we can't direct them to meet. I personally cannot tell IFO what to do. And I think you personally can't, but we as a board, are we their bosses?
No, well, I think Councilor Flores, that's where, we have the representatives from both the city council and the commission. So yes, I think you as the council are Mr. Peely's boss.
Yes, but we're not a quorum here.
No, you're not a quorum, but if that's the directive and at the pleasure of the council that you would like Mr. Peely to invest or to start having, I believe Mr. Peely and his staff would have those conversations. I think the same with Mr. Macias. If myself, Commissioner Allens, and the rest of the commission were to ask Mr. Macias to engage in those discussions, it's not a resolution that would have to be passed during a council or a commission meeting. I believe that's just the directive that we would ask, then they would go and do that. That's my belief. But the reason I ask is that they have the discussions in advance is so that we have at least some sort of background, some foundation in which we're going into a work session to go into versus coming in completely fresh and not knowing where the sides are coming from. I just would like to have that, at least that would be what I'm seeing. I think it would be more productive in a manner like that.
Well, it does seem as if it would be productive, Mr. Chair, and I totally respect that perspective, but I want to be part of that conversation. I want this board to be part of the conversation that Mr. Peely and Mr. Macias are having. I think it's imperative, and the reason is because I don't want to get misinformation from either Mr. Peely or Mr. Macias, and I don't mean misinformation like they're lying to us, but I want to make sure what transpires in their conversations, and I think that we as a board deserve that. And that's, I would like a work session where they come prepared with whatever they need to present to us as a board, and we come prepared with full knowledge as to what action we would have to take regarding the JPA. And so long as we get that down, then the rest would follow. The rest would follow either way, whether we come to we're deadlocked, or whether it's resolved that we move forward with a new JPA. And that's what I would propose. And I think it would be expeditious. I think we would move along quite faster, instead of setting a meeting in October and then another one in November and then maybe another one in December, and then the year is over and then the clock is ticking insofar as budgets go. I mean, in December, we get called by the budget people to start thinking of what we want for 2023, and by May, or whatever the quarterlies we get, it's already set in stone. So I'm just saying, I'm just thinking prospectively, and just to make things, just everything more efficient. And that's my humble opinion. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
And I see Commissioner Allens, and before, I just want to make a comment. I know, for example, this is just one recent, right? The MPO, which is, we have a JPA between the town of Mesilla, the county, and the city of Las Cruces. And one of the things that was done was that they created a committee that worked together from each of the representatives. And then based off of that, then they came to present to the policy committee or the policy board. And that way, there were conversations, there were representatives, and I don't know, I think that worked very well, because there was, there wasn't just, there was a timeline set in which they were working towards to get something done. And then they were able to come back and request input in the meantime from the board before we finally were going to approve it. But just as a thought, I don't know, I thought that worked very well. Mayor Pro Tem.
But Mr. Chair, just as a follow-up to what you just said, what kind of an issue was it? Was it a dissolution of a whole organization as it exists? I mean, this is big time. This is really important. It's not an issue about where we're going to distribute buses or whatever. I mean, and I'm not minimizing the importance of your subcommittee. I'm just saying this is a different animal, no pun intended.
Commissioner Allens.
I wonder if the city manager would like to weigh in on any of this.
And I didn't, Commissioner Allens, the only reason, Mr. Peely, please go ahead, and I apologize, Mr. Peely, that I didn't call on you. The main reason I had not was just because we had Mr. Enriquez as our ex officio member on the committee, so I apologize, Mr. Peely.
No problem, Mr. Chair. I'm just popping in. I know Mr. Enriquez is very capable. Was just coming in to listen in. As it has been mentioned, this is really important. And so I appreciate the opportunity just to share a few thoughts. I don't think I have anything profound to say, but a couple thoughts. When I first came to the city, this was one of the issues that were brought to my attention. And from my understanding is this was the will of maybe the board in general, or the majority of the board, to move away from the JPA and have this organization under our city entirely. And meeting with Mr. Macias, I recognized that there was some difference in opinion there. And so what I wanted to do is make sure that we had from those that make the decisions the direction. And so from the staff perspective, I mean, we get your direction from you. And if you're asking us, if you're telling us that this is what we want to do, our job is to come forward and tell you how we're going to do it. If you're asking us if this is something we should do, then that is where we engage a third-party consultant or somebody to come and do that, because I wouldn't do that. So in that regard, I do agree with Mr. Macias, if that's what the board is asking. But my understanding that there's already a sentiment to move in a different direction. I'm not entirely sure where that came from, but that's the vibe I got when I first got here. And so I appreciate that it's on the agenda now, because really what I wanted to hear, I wanted to hear if that was true, if the majority of the board felt that way, then it becomes staff's responsibility to just see that it happens. And we would give you the costs associated with timelines. If we're looking at doing that within the upcoming fiscal year, we're getting short on time because of the budget process. And so if we're looking at having a separation in July, as was mentioned by the councilors, budget season starts, here in a couple months. And so we'd have to start looking at that. And so it would be, again, I mean, if we're looking to, I don't necessarily disagree with going with a third-party consultant, but if we're going to do that, that has to be done pretty soon. And again, I was coming in to just hear what the sentiments of the board was. I just wanted to hear it straight from your mouths and maybe some of your concerns. Because at the end of the day, if it's not about money, if it's not about, and it's just because it works better, even if that's just philosophically how a board decision, then the discussion, in my opinion, stops there, and we just figure out a way to do it. And so I don't know if there's any questions from the staff side and timelines or capacity in being able to do that I can answer from the board, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Peely. Are there any Commissioner Allens? And then I'll go to Mayor Pro Tem Gandara.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Manager.
Thank you.
Whether we meet, as Councilor Flores suggests, first and foremost, or whether you, as city manager, and Mr. Macias, as county manager, meet first to prep us, I don't think either meeting is called for until we take up Mr. Macias' suggestion that we bring in an outside consultant to figure out what's the best way to go, and at that point, we can start having meetings, because at least we would be informed on a factual, independent basis.
Thank you, Commissioner Allens. Mayor Pro Tem Gandara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Mr. Peely. I don't really have questions or comments. For me, it's more about, I think direction does need to come from this board. It's answering these questions. One, do we dissolve? If so, what does that look like? And then we can move into that person, the agency helping us move in that direction. Or do we stay together? And what does the GPA say? And and I think we're hearing from our executive director and staff who've worked so diligently today that said at one time I thought, yeah, this would be a good idea to do. I'm not thinking that way anymore. He says we want to stay, but these are the parameters we'd like to work in. And I think we need to listen to that. I think as probably the longest standing board member here, I do know that over the years, we've had a couple of transitions of executive directors. And we landed Clint, and he's done a tremendous job bringing everybody together to have conversations about how best to operate the center. And he's saying today, as we've been able, it was a blessing probably that we didn't work on quickly to change it to move into the city, is, he's saying stay with the JPA. That those are the questions we have to ask ourselves and answer today to give him direction moving forward. And then I think, honestly, Mr. Peely, I think some of the discourse has been, and I mentioned this earlier, is the ACOs, right? We are operating in different, because of their job, but also it doesn't serve the center in a lot of ways. And Clint indicating our mission needs to change, because our mission is says something, right? And it's going to be different if we sort of incorporate the ACOs. And hearing from which I had heard, that our ACOs operate, there's certain things that need to happen prior to, right? They're under contract that will need to be negotiated, right, with the union, because they do certain lawful things or carry the law. So we have to work through that, but it's not completely unheard of that other municipalities do this. And so those are things, again, I feel we have to be very clear from this board what we want moving forward. And I don't think, does the director know? Do we want to keep the JPA? Do we want to dissolve it? I think we need to answer those questions before we say, yes, we want to hire this consultant to come in and tell us what is the best possible, or 2 or 3 options.
Okay. Thank you, Mayor Pro
Thank
Tem
you.
Gondra. Commissioner Ellens?
Mr. Chairman, so far this discussion has been primarily about process. I would suggest at this time that we ask the public to speak out, because I'm sure some of them want to talk about the animals.
Commissioner Ellens, are we asking them for general public input, or you're asking them to speak on the JPA and process or Mr. Thacker's plan, which started this whole conversation, and it's the agenda item we're on?
Whatever they have to say, let's hear it, whether it's about process or the animals.
Mr. Peely, did you have anything else to add before we?
If I may, Mr. Chair, just before you turn the time over, if we can just maybe reiterate to a statement I made earlier. For me, I do believe that this is the board's ultimate decision. I know everybody agrees with that. I apologize for missing the first part of the discussion, so I didn't hear what was going on before and how we came to this point. But what I really wanted to see happen from this is that direction, just like Mayor Pro Tem or Board Member Gondeta mentioned, that we get some clear direction. And in that regard, again, if we're not asking the if question, if it's about how, then I don't think we need a third-party consultant to do that. I can tell you how. I mean, we'll get with staff and tell you how. But if you're talking about if you're still deciding as a board whether or not this is a good move, then I think the reasons for that need to be brought up. Because if it has to do with some quantifiable, objective reason or just objective reason, if you're thinking that maybe this would be a money move, this will cost us less overall, we'll be more efficient overall, we'll be able to function better, then I think we can have a presentation, work session, and maybe a third-party consultant is necessary to show that. But if that's not what's in question, if it's just about what works better, and I didn't know that our director had that opinion, because if that's the case, I would really take that opinion seriously. And so if that's the case, then we can figure out the other issues that were mentioned. I mean, if we stay with the JPA, but we need to improve on certain areas, including ACO and how that's managed, we can have that conversation, and we can be prepared for that conversation as well in a future work session or even in our meetings internally. But I'm just hoping that we would get to a point where, as Board Member Gondeta mentioned, that we can really get some direction, because since I've been here for about a year now, Mr. Chair, and I've gotten opinions from all over the place. I've gotten, some are telling me that we want to move out of the JPA. Others are saying that no, it's the city forcing us to do that, and I just don't know, and I haven't gotten a reason why. But if that can come out, that would be really helpful for us today.
Well, Mr. Peely, I appreciate that, and I think that's a fair assessment of the situation of whether, I think as the board, I think that's where I'm, at least, I don't know that we've answered that question. I think is that, I mean, at least that's my assessment. It seems like and maybe it's divided by the county and the city and having two different things, but I don't know that there's a direct answer yet on, do we want to move out of the JPA or continue with the JPA? And I think that's a fair, I think as Mr. Peely has suggested, I think that's a good first place to start. Councilor Flores.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mr. Peely. I agree with everything he said is absolutely correct. Because I was one of the counselors that went in and said, I think we need to break away. I mean, and he did hear that. From me, for sure. From others, my colleagues, I don't know. Other fellow counselors, I don't know. It's not important. But so I think right now, this is not an action item, Mr. Chair, so we can't vote on it. So this is what I propose. I propose that we hold a meeting as soon as possible with this, yes, so that we can vote on this exclusively and as quickly as possible to move forward, for the board to entertain the JPA, the status of the JPA. And if we do that, that would necessarily cover the umbrella, the whole thing about the JPA, whether we change it or keep it or whatever. But I'm just saying to address the status of the JPA. And if we do that, then we can have a further discussion or meet to vote on it. We can't vote on it today because if it was an action item, then I would propose that we vote on it and whether we support or not support what Clint has presented to us. And I'm sorry you missed his presentation, Ifo, because he was very thorough about why the revamping or redefining the JPA would make the running of the center more efficient all around in every respect, from the TNR issue that we just, that we're dealing with right now to the entire function of the center. So, but everything he's given us, and he made it very clear that he does not want to dissolve the JPA. He wants it redefined. So it's a question of moving on that to make sure. And then, of course, I'm speaking primarily because of the fiscal aspect. It's coming up. It's right on our heels. I don't know if we can move that quickly, but I think we might be able to. We need 72-hour notice to set another meeting, and we can look at, we can see what we can work out between as soon as possible, just to make it expeditious and make sure that we get this on the track, because this has been mulling. This has been kicked around since before I was on city council, and I'm going on 4 years on this board. And it's good that everybody put their chips on the table. Everybody's clear and open about perspectives or chismes or whatever you want to call it. And so that's what I would propose, Mr. Chair. That it would be your call as chair to call the meeting. But I would say that we need that 72-hour notice minimally. I know that the end of the month and the beginning of a new week, most of us have, we do here on City Council, a lighter calendar. I don't know about you all, but that's what I would propose. I don't know if I guess it's a motion?
No, we wouldn't have a motion. It
No,
would just be
because
something we'll talk.
We can get a
And that's what I'm
poll,
saying.
you can do a poll to see where we're at. It doesn't.
Yeah,
No, that's fine. I think
I don't know if Lynn heard me, but I don't know if Lynn would agree with having a meeting and calling a meeting and allowing the 72-hour notice as required by the OMA.
Councilor Flores, I would look at sometime the week of October 4th. I think if I would make a suggestion that if Thursdays will work well for us, October 7th.
I'll be out of town, sorry, for the week and return on the 14th.
You're out of town the first week of October?
5th through the 15th, Tuesday through Tuesday of the following week.
Mr. Chair.
Mr. Chairman.
Vice Chair Bates-Stubbe?
Might I suggest, I know that we all have very busy schedules, so we can flesh out the exact date with our respective admins as well to make sure that everything coordinates, but we can aim for as soon as possible in regards to everyone's schedule.
That's great.
Thank you, Madam Vice Chair. Commissioner Owens?
What exactly is this meeting for?
The idea would be is that we have a vote to determine whether we want to continue with the JPA or move, just to get direction from the board as to where it's going to go.
So this would be direction to management of the city and the county? Because we don't have the authority to terminate the JPA.
No, correct. It's just providing direction on both of our respective managements on where we're going to go.
I think I'd like to talk to management before this meeting.
Well, I agree, and I think that would be part of, at least my hope is that we'll have, I think as Mr. Peely had suggested, then we can have some discussion as to what the impacts could be in either direction. But I agree with Madam Vice Chair. We'll follow up after this meeting and determine maybe the best date for the board to meet. Could we then move on to public input? Right now, I think given the time, I don't know that if we're not going to be deciding anything at the moment, I'm going to forego public input specifically on this discussion item, Commissioner Allens. Okay. All right, I think we've got direction on that one. We'll move on then, unless some other input from the board, we'll move on to discussion item 5B, the Ascmv's role in the new City of Las Cruces trap neuter release program.
Clint Thacker, Executive Director, Animal Service Center, Mesilla Valley. Basically, we have 2 minutes to go over this really quick. Again, this is a conversation item. This is not an action item. This program or this budget was put together just on behalf of the Animal Task Force subcommittee called the TNR committee, because the city wanted to have some information regarding a budget for the trap neuter return program that was approved via ordinance. So with the subcommittee, members of the public, also I'm on it, and also Gino, the city ACL supervisor, sits on that subcommittee. And these are what we came out with: the purchase of traps and deterrents that would be handled by animal control officers to give individuals that don't want animals on or don't want these cats in their property or on their property is $9,200. Some outreach by the ASCMV, basic public service announcements, education materials, and so forth, $40,000. A TNR coordinator that kind of ties in with what we discussed in the big picture for the ASCMV, with the helpline and office assistant. That's basically a position at the ASCMV, a front office position that can have that availability to answer questions and schedule and help as needed. Is the $110,500. The full surgeries with a goal of 1,500 surgeries, $64 each. That is an accurate amount that we have for supplies and also for the surgeon to do that. And that's $96,000. A $40 co-payment if they're not receiving any assistance. So in other words, if somebody brings up an animal that's in their colony and they want it sterilized, it would be a $40 copay if they did not qualify for any of the other programs. The funding allocation, that's $33,000, looking for the rescues, for public stay and neuter. And then the crisis fund is a small amount, $10,000. That is for anything that might be wrong with the community cat. That would be easily addressable. It's nearly impossible, as you know, to treat a feral cat after it comes out of anesthesia. They don't like to be touched. So if anything can be done in a manner that's less intrusive for that, that's what that money is set aside for. And then we have trapper teams that anybody that is unable to set traps, watch those traps. We have individuals that would be able to rent the traps and help out. So that would be the $10,000. And then estimated study for a population would be around $5,000 for the grand total of $313,700. This is a information for you. If you have questions, I'd like to invite Kathy Stark up to the front. She's a member of the subcommittee for this. She can address some of the questions. She's the one that developed this and get some of the thinking behind it. I'm not, it's going to sound weird, but I'm not really sure why this presentation was required to be made to the board of the Ascmv, maybe so you can see how it's going to impact. This is more for the city can see in a city council meeting that they wanted to know what a budget looked like, and so this is the amount. Pretty much this is a heads up to the board that could be some more money being requested. So with the questions, I can help out, or Kathy can as well. Oh, she's not here. How about?
Mr. Chair, if I may?
Yes.
Mayor Pro Tem Gandara, please.
Thank you. Clint, can you scroll to the beginning? Okay. I appreciate all the work that was put into this. We were asking for something like this in terms of a budget that could be presented to City Council, given that we have instituted a new TNR ordinance. Although one of, I think, the most important thing in my mind is that research and evaluator that's going to be looking and collecting data and sifting through that data, that it isn't some staff person doing it, all due respect, unless they have that expertise and that's, and so for me, that was what needs to be a part of this, because you're going to have to answer to, which you promised you would, right, in terms of once this started, we needed to know essentially how effective the program is, and I don't see anything here in terms of data evaluator.
The population estimate is the one that's at the end for the $5,000. That's the contract. That's what was brought on. And Jerry, if you're here, you can come up as well. But that was brought in as the amount to have somebody do that estimate. The problem is it's nearly impossible to estimate population-wise the impact that because you have to know the population, right, in order to get that.
I understand, but there's an evaluator out of the university that does this, Clint, and can put something together. So, and then the other question is, how are these estimates? How did you come up with these estimates?
That's for Jerry.
Hi, Jerry.
Hi,
Lewis.
Jerry.
Hi, Animal Task Force. So in terms of the study, we tried.
You have to say your name, Jerry.
Oh, I did, sorry. Jerry Wheelis, Animal Task Force. So in terms of the study, we did try and approach Dr. Romer numerous times, and we did not get a response. So that was our first goal. So after that, we tried to look at other programs and see how much their data collection cost, and we based our number on that. So it's not a finite, it could change. But that's what we tried to do with that number.
Thank you.
In terms of the other numbers, we collected information from both Clint and Animal Control, and based on, I have an extended sheet here if somebody needs to see it, with the actual working numbers of what makes up the total in the columns. Excuse me. So the purchase of traps and deterrents was based on the numbers that we received from Gino as to what amounts they currently have and what they will need. So, sorry, that's my phone, okay. So there are a number of categories in there, different size traps, different and so forth and so on, okay. I'm sorry, did you have another specific question?
Just very specific where the amounts came from.
Yeah, so that's what they came from, was numbers given to us by Clint and Gino as to what they currently needed. And then we also researched against other TNR programs throughout the country in similar sized cities, municipalities. So that's how we got to those numbers.
Thank you, Jerry. So would some of this come from codes, animal codes?
Yes.
Budget or whatever? Is that what I'm
The
assuming?
first item for the purchase of traps and deterrents it says animal control unit, that would actually have to come from animal control.
Okay, okay,
So,
got it.
The rest of them, it says ASCMV or it says animal control next to it.
Got you. And then and the TNR coordinator is the same one that you had, Clint, from that other slide, yes? Or the other presentation? Okay,
Yes, ma'am.
okay, all right, got you. And a lot of this, I'm trying to remember the information. So what is the same and different? So that when I'm figuring this, do you understand what I'm asking?
No, ma'am.
So.
Between the two presentations?
You gave us a presentation, right, on the TNR program and I think and staffing and such. How much of it is the same and or separate?
The only simulation or similarity between the two is the TNR coordinator, and I could also see some of the helpline or office assistant being rolled into one of those positions. So that's the only duplication there as far as staff.
Got it. Okay. All right. Thank you. Those are all my questions, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Jerry and Clint, and the task force, the subcommittee of the task force. I know you put a lot of effort into this. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Are there any other questions? Okay. Thank you very much. Now we're on to discussion item 5C, the dates for November and December board meetings.
Thank you. And I didn't have anything written up for this. I probably should have gotten a calendar or something out. But we're running into an issue every year where the fourth Thursday runs into the Thanksgiving and also Christmas. So if we just need to have those dates set of when we like to change them, so we can have that next meeting on the next agenda.
Okay, so right now, at least if I'm looking at this, right, the meeting in November, is Thanksgiving on November 25th.
Yes.
And then in December, it's December 23rd is what I see on my calendar.
Yes, that is correct.
And I believe I think what we've done the last couple of years, I thought had been, we did it on the Wednesday or
the week before.
The week before? Okay.
Yes. So that would be in November, that would be the 18th, November 18th, and then December would be the 16th.
Wait, were you saying the Wednesday before or the Thursday before?
The Thursday before, just a week earlier.
Okay. The only issue is I think, Mayor Pro Tem, is we have, well, I guess depends on whether or not we have a South Central Solid Waste Authority meeting. That's usually the third Thursday at 9 a.m. So.
Okay, we can do Wednesday if Wednesday's better for everybody as well. So that would be November 17th and December 15th. Or you can do December 22nd.
I'd almost prefer, me personally, I'd almost prefer that we do it the week before also.
Okay.
In the case, whatever plans we may have for Christmas holidays, but I don't know, what is the rest of the board? Does that December 15th?
And November 17th.
November 17th, would that work for our meetings?
I don't have my calendar, I'm sorry. But did you say, Mr. Chair, that it would be the Wednesday before Christmas Eve or the Thursday before? The week before would be a Thursday, the 18th.
Well, it would be the Wednesday, the week before. So we would normally, so in November, we would have been planned for the 25th, November 25th. And then we'd be looking at the Wednesday prior, which would be, I guess if it helps at all, the third Wednesday of the month.
Yes, 17th.
So December would also be the Wednesday before the,
Yes, Counselor, that's what,
so that would be the 26th.
15th.
15th.
Perdón, the 15th.
Okay. I think we're getting general nods and so we're good.
Okay.
We'll plan on that.
So we'll have the next meeting, or in October, we'll have Wednesday, the 17th.
Oh, no, well, he just
I'm
means
sorry.
on the bottom of the agenda.
On the next meeting's agenda, it will say, next meeting is November the 17th.
Yeah. So at the bottom of our agenda, it says the next meeting, so we just wanted to have it on there.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so now we're on to the public input portion of the meeting. So I invite any members of the public that would like to come speak. Please go ahead and come on up. Ms. Gilbert. Thank you for being so patient. And
yes, thank you. I'm Jean Gilbert, and I'd like to preface my public input by saying that it's within the context of my concern is about limited public access or appointment only at the animal shelter. And I want to preface it by saying that it's within the context of not wanting to see a precedent set or for this to be really prolonged. And they're talking about COVID being an endemic. So it's something that we're going to have to learn to live with. And so if you can keep that in mind as I share my public comments, and some of my concerns have been, I want to say, minimized or even alleviated now after seeing some of the presentations. So responding to input about a limited public access policy and no walkthroughs at the shelter, Clint had said that people can get in almost right away with an appointment to see an animal. But the reliance on appointments only, especially if done in a very prolonged manner, is an exclusionary practice because it's based on the assumption that everyone has equal internet access to animals' photos and that all the adoptable pets, including the lost and found, because people are looking for animals, that all those photos are current and posted. And then the assumption that photos alone are going to be enough for a person to make a connection with an animal, to therefore want to schedule an appointment to go to the shelter. So animals are definitely missed or passed up for all of these reasons. So limiting public access is costing some animals, their lives. Okay, and while appointment-based access is not a new practice, it is mostly done by private rescues. Housing smaller numbers of animals are the ones that do this, and not your public shelters that are funded by taxpayer dollars that are funding 500 or more animals who depend on public visibility and the community to help them. Best Friends Animal Sanctuary, Alley Cat Allies, ASPCA were mentioned as ones that support appointment-only access policies for shelters. But we need to keep in mind that they're speaking within the context of their own privately run shelters. And their shelters these people are not officials for municipal government-run shelters that are funded by taxpayer dollars. And while socialization opportunities have increased for shelter animals with volunteer dog walkers, once a week off-site events, adoption events, and manager weekly checks and other activities that have been noted, it's still a very harsh environment for animals. And some of them do languish, there's no question about it. So time is of the essence for getting these animals out through adoption, through foster, through transport, and so on and so on. And limiting public access isn't going to help the ticking clock. And it negatively impacts the welfare for shelter animals. And that's why I feel strongly that it cannot be a prolonged policy. The governor's amended the health orders related to COVID and public gatherings, as we're noting right here in this meeting, and school openings and restaurants and so on and so on. And this is we're able to mitigate the spread through social distancing, mask wearing, and proper sanitation. And so the Animal Services Center can put that into place to allow some public access at a minimum. Limiting public access is change from our previous policies, but it is not a progressive change. It's not about flexibility, and it's not about increasing opportunities for animals. The taxpayers are the eyes and the ears of the shelter, and the shelter should be a very welcoming place. And I have utmost confidence in Clint and his strong leadership, so it isn't anything about that. It's just that we really have to think about how this is going to be handled, and that it cannot be an indefinite policy. So I'm saying that the ASCMV should at the very least consider a block of hours during the day for public access and the rest for appointments, which would allow for the staffing shortages that have been mentioned, and it would be a form of compromise going forward. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Gilbert. Is there any other public input?
Good morning, board members. My name is Claire Kapner. Just for some of you, I've been a volunteer at the shelter for about 15 years. I've also, for about 12 years, have done the adoptions at the farmers market every Saturday morning. Now, and this kind of goes along with what Jean just said, the shelter at the farmers market, I'm not doing them anymore as a volunteer. They only send staff. And now they're just changing the schedule where they will only be at the farmers market every other week, and every other week they will be at PetSmart. Now, it used to be we had usually 3 adoptions every Saturday, one at the farmers market, which I always did, one at PetSmart, Petco, which was done by staff, and then a lot of retail, like Kia used to do a adoption event, and I believe they also paid for the adoptions. And once a week, a different entity would sponsor an adoption. So anyway, also now at the farmers market, which used to be an opportunity for shelter dogs to get out, they only have foster animals at the market, which these animals are already being socialized and they're already in a home. And so the animals at the shelter are not getting exposure at any of these adoption events. Very few. Last week we had one at the PetSmart, and some of them were shelter animals, but a lot of them, again, were foster animals. Now, it's okay to bring fosters, but we used to have foster animals and shelter animals at the market. So I don't know why things have changed. Also, the volunteers that used to volunteer with me at the market, they don't come anymore. There's nothing for them to do. So I go down every Saturday and I sit with the cats, and I have a foster cat that I bring down. So anyway, I don't know why things have changed. Maybe Clint can address that, but I think it's a big change, and I don't think it's a good change.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Kapner. All right. Mr. Bryce.
Frank Bryce, Humane Society of Southern Mexico. This has been a very interesting meeting, and first of all, I want to appreciate the interaction with the group here. It's different than what we used to see. You guys did a much better job of interacting and answering questions. I've got 3 little items here. The first one pertains to what these 2 ladies just said. If we're going to reduce this, we need to make some kind of a modification, if we can, where maybe we could advertise that the shelter's open from 1 to 4 on Saturday afternoon for general visits, so you don't have all this exposure that they may be worried about. I don't believe that that really is a problem that can't be fixed on a regular basis. I do think the public needs to get in there, not only to hold the shelter accountable for what they're doing, the way it's run, but also to support it, to come back out. So I went to the shelter, and they have the nicest animals out there. I got this, and go out and get your animal. We need to keep that constituency. The other one is the surrender animals to the shelter. This does concern me even greater. We get a lot of calls from people who have an animal. They took it to the shelter, so we want to turn it in. No, you can't turn it in. Call HSS&M, call Cats Meow, call this, and they put all of that responsibility on the person. And I don't doubt that responsibility should be shared. That's true, but they're already there. The problem is most of us in the field are also already well booked with animals. Just myself, I'm fostering 16 animals that don't even go to the shelter to start with. But when they call me, we don't have any room either. I would like to see the shelter set up some kind of a little short thing where they say, give us an animal, we'll call the people that are designed to take it that may have the room. They take that responsibility, because if nobody takes it, the shelter has to get it anyway. And that's what they generally say, that they'll take it if nobody else wants it. Well, that makes us all look bad, even though we're doing the best we can, because we're full. Maybe we could change that. And I do want to say thanks to the shelter for what I think is the tremendous job they're doing on TNR. We've been taking cats in on a regular basis. The more cats we get spay neutered, the healthier they'll be in the long run, and we will have less kittens to reproduce more cats. They're doing a great job of getting them in. It's a little loose in a way, but it seems to be working quite well. And every time I take cats out there, I see lots of other cat folks. They're taking care of their cats. And if we can keep that up, that's a really good thing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bryce. Is there any other remaining public input? Okay, we'll move on to chair and board comments. Are there any comments from the board? Okay. All right, well then, can I get a motion and a second to adjourn?
So moved. Second.
All right, moved by Councilor Flores, seconded by Vice Chair Beitastuvi. So at 12:23 p.m., we'll call this meeting adjourned. Thank you all.